Whenever you're ready, John.
Okay, all right. I'm going to call to order the Addison Northwest School District Board of Directors for a joint meeting with Mount Abe School District on April 26th at 6:02. And I'll stop there, let Dawn call to order her group, and then we'll make some introductions, everyone.
So I'm going to call the Mount Abraham Unified School District to order at 6:02 for our joint meeting with Addison Northwest School District.
And Dawn, do you want to go ahead and start with some introductions?
Sure. We'll start with the Mount Abraham Board for introductions. So my name is Dawn Griswold. I live in the town of Moncton. I am the board chair. And then I'm just going to call on whoever I see next on the screen of Mount Abraham members. When the last Mount Abraham member goes, would you give Patrick a turn to introduce, please? So the next person I see is Kevin Hansen.
I'm Kevin Hansen. Excuse me. I'm Kevin Hansen. I represent Bristol. My wife and I are Mount Abe graduates, as well as our two daughters. So we are invested in the district historically and looking to the future as well.
You're muted still, Dawn.
Sorry. Dave Sharp, I see you next. Nope, Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Sharp. I live in Bristol. Both our boys were Mount Abe graduates and UVM graduates, and now are on their own. We have two grandchildren in the Bristol school system.
Okay, and Krista, I see you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Krista Siringo. I'm a Bristol representative for the Mount Abe board, and I have twin daughters that are in 9th grade at Mount Abe and a son who is in 5th grade at Bristol.
Okay, and next I see our newest member, Brad Johnson.
Hi, I'm Brad Johnson. I live in Starksboro, a new member of the board. Happy to be here. I went to Beeman when I was a kid, and I currently have a daughter at Mount Abe.
Okay, and then I see Rob Backlund.
Hi, my name is Rob Backlund. Live up in Lincoln with my wife and our little daughter, who will be a member of the graduating class of 2037.
Okay, and then I see Steve Rooney.
Hi, I'm Steve Rooney. I'm a representative on the Mount Abe board from Starksboro. I graduated from Virgins. My wife graduated from Mount Abe, so I know a merger can work.
Okay, thank you. I see Liz Sayer next.
Hi, still representative. My grandfather went to West Lincoln, and my mother to Mount Abe, and myself to Mount Abe, as well as my son.
Okay, and then I see Sarah LaPearl.
Hi, I'm Sarah LaPearl. I have two kids, one at Beeman and one at, I'm from New Haven, and one at Mount Abe, and I went to Middlebury. And I also coach with the Mount Abe Virgins lacrosse team, and I'm a high school teacher at CVU.
I think that's all our members. We have a few that are absent tonight, and then so I'll have Patrick introduce himself.
All right, hi everyone, Patrick Green, superintendent. I live in Lincoln, and I have two daughters, both at Mount Abe, 9th grade and 11th grade.
Okay, John, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. My name's John Strout. I live here in Virgins. I have a couple of young people who go to Virgins Union Elementary School. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you all for joining and being here tonight. I'm just going to go down the list. I think we're on multiple screens. So Tom, I know you're out there. Will you say hello and introduce yourself?
My name is Tom Borchard. I'm the representative from Waltham. I have a kid at UVM, a kid who just graduated from Virgin's high school, and a kid who's in the middle school. And I look forward to working with you all in some way, for some fashion, over the next time.
Thank you. Lori, is Lori Childers here?
Lori Childers is here.
Hey, Lori.
Hi, John. I'm Lori Childers. I am one of the representatives from Addison, the town of, and I was not lucky enough to grow up around here, but I had 4 children that graduated from Virgin's Union High School, and they are now all college graduates.
Awesome. Bill Clark.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Clark. I live in Ferrisburg and VUHS class of 93. And I have 2 kids in the high school and 2 kids at FCS.
Thank you, Bill. I think I saw Martha.
Hi, I'm Martha DeGraff, and I'm from Virgin's. I am a graduate of the class of 1993 as well. And so is my husband. Both my parents graduated from Virgin's, and my mom was a longtime teacher at the high school. So I have pretty deep, strong roots here. I have 4 children, one who's graduated from Virgin's, and I have another one that is a junior, and I'll have an incoming freshman.
And thank you, Martha. And Kirsten.
Hi, I'm Kirsten De La Cruz from Panton. I have 6 kids. 3 have graduated from Virgin's, and I have a junior and 2 in an elementary school. And I'm also the Virgin's Commodore president for Booster Club.
Thank you. I know George Gardner was trying to get on. I think I got it to him. George, are you here? Okay.
I am.
All right.
I'm a VUHS graduate of 61. I have 2 children that also graduated from there, and 2 grandchildren that graduated last year.
Awesome. Thank you, George. Chris.
From Ferrisburg.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Cahart from Ferrisburg. I graduated class of 1992. My wife graduated from Virgin's as well. My son and daughter are both attending Virgin's right now. My daughter's about to graduate.
Thank you, Chris. Amy?
Hi there, Amy Kittredge. I am an Addison representative. My husband and I graduated from Virgin's, and I currently have 3 kiddos in the Addison Northwest School District.
Thank you, Amy. Mark?
I'm Mark Koenig. I am a Flatlander who ended up in Virgin's, but I do have a Vermonter as a son who is just wrapping up 7th grade.
Thanks, Mark. Keith?
Hi, I'm Keith Morrell. I'm a representative for Virgin's. I grew up in the far northern reaches of Vermont in Fairfax, so I did not benefit from a VUHS education, but I have 3 kids in the system. 2 are currently in the elementary school here in Virgin's, and 1 is wrapping up at Evergreen and will be headed into the elementary school next year.
And Christina?
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Macklin. I'm a Ferrisburg rep as well, and I have a son and daughter that graduated from BUHS and have also luckily graduated college too and are out in the world. It's great to be here, and I look forward to our work together.
Thank you. I know we also, before I introduce Sheila, I would like to, I know we have 2 student representatives. I know 1 is here, I see her. And I'm not sure if Ben Houston, who's in a sports team, but Reagan, you're here. Will you say hello and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Reagan Cahart. I live in Ferrisburg. I'm the student representative for the ANWSD school board, and I will be graduating from Virgin's this year.
Awesome, awesome. And I don't see Ben, so Ben, are you here? I don't think so. Okay, thank you. And I'll turn it over to our superintendent to introduce herself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Soul, Superintendent of Addison Northwest. I am a lifelong Vermonter, 7 generations back, but I'm from Randolph, so I didn't grow up here either. I raised my family in the Harwood Unified Union School District, and I They're all scattered. I have 3 children, 2 in college and 1 out on the West Coast. So, but Randolph is a lot like this community, agricultural based and small. And so I realized the significance of this conversation that we're starting tonight. And I appreciate everyone being here.
Thank you. So Dawn and I have a couple of moments of opening remarks to kind of mark the moment. And then I'll kind of go over the directions for our meeting. This is a public meeting. It's essentially 2 boards that are meeting separately together to make sure that we meet open meeting law. So Dawn, would you mind getting us started?
Not at all. So as I was preparing for this meeting, I kept thinking about how I was feeling about it. And I kept coming back to the anticipation. That combination of excitement and nervousness from starting something new, and it's really hard to envision what it is going to be until it's actually experienced. I just kept thinking about, the expectation, the hope, and that this is an adventure. It's the adventure of beginning something unpredictable that completely makes up for all the fear and uncertainty. This meeting happening here tonight is the beginning of our new adventure, something we should all be proud of. It's a result of the feedback that we heard in our communities from our survey results. And I would expect that Addison Northwest has heard feedback similar to that. I just want to recognize all of you for being open to new things and courageous enough to begin this conversation. I came across some words of Maya Angelou, and the words were, "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some humor, some style." As we are embarking down a path of learning and potentially finding a way for our schools to launch to the future, I just want to thank you all for taking the first steps as we continue on. And don't ever forget the courage, the hopes, and the worries that we all started with. John?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dawn. So I'll start. I'll just say to you all that I'm grateful for this opportunity that we have tonight. I see it as a really great moment to live out some of the things that make Vermont a great place to live, some creative problem solving, some cooperation, some good old-fashioned civic dialogue. Folks, school boards don't just show up and work together, and here we are. And I'm optimistic that we can do our work tonight and set the foundation for a study group to answer a common question that both our districts have generated, but we know that we as individual boards cannot answer alone. And that question is it advisable to form a union school district? So it's no accident that we're here tonight, though, I think, neighbors. Our districts have a long track record of cooperation. We've built a lot of trust that's necessary to achieve common goals together. I'd like to recognize a couple of those. Our food service cooperative, the Addison Wayfinders program, our many shared athletics teams show us that we can work, and we do work well together. So I know and I respect all of those that we have a unique set of histories, and we even have what I'd call a delightful set of rivalries that go back a long way. But our children are friends, we work together, we serve together, we worship together. And I know as well as you that we are not a couple of communities that are trying to take advantage of each other. I know that we're not here. We've rejected a game of chicken, and we're here to try to figure out what's possible for our students' education, put that as the priority. So I see this as just one more step in a long pattern of cooperation and connectedness between our districts and our people. So I thank you to both boards and to our communities for doing the work to get to this moment, for spending time last fall in many, many community engagement meetings, thinking about many, many different options for our future, including this one. So this is a good moment for us. I think it's an optimistic one, one that sets out a path to see what we can learn together in a merger study committee. So let's do that work tonight, neighbors and friends, for those folks who will be on this study committee, to give them a chance to do the really hard and important work. And that's figuring out whether it is advisable to form a union school district. So to that end, Dawn and I met a couple of times to figure out some mutually agreed upon processes for the meeting. And if you haven't opened up the directions for joint board meeting process, would you please make sure that you do so now and just take a look at it? And I'll just kind of highlight a couple of the aspects there. You can read the top part of the things that we've really already done, the things that we're trying to do tonight. One thing that's really important is that even though the boards are meeting together, that we are going to try our best. We need to follow Robert's Rules of Order. We need to follow open meeting law. So we're going to do that together. So we thought a little bit about technology. Speaker view might be helpful for everyone. In terms of discussions, because we have so many here, we're going to try to do our best to sort of move through our board members to make sure we can just say, like, Christina, would you like to comment? And if no, or not, if you don't even say anything, we'll just kind of keep moving on, or we may even group people together. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to at least say something first. In terms of action items, when we get to that moment, we'll sort of treat it as the old union districts did before, and sort of go in a carousel format, and just by alphabetical, A and WSD will just go first. So we need to, each board needs to make motions, second motions, have discussion, and vote as individual boards. We're not sure about time, but we're going to do the best that we can. We're going to move to public comment. Dawn, or I will read something. I think it's actually me. We'll read something for about public comment in just a moment. And last but not least, there's a parking lot at the end. I'm sure we're going to generate a bunch of questions and a bunch of ideas. If they don't get brought up here, please, anyone, go to the parking lot link and just write them in there. And we'll try to do our best to review them and respond to them later on. So each individual board is responsible for their own minutes, and the agendas and adjourning will happen separately. Any questions so far? All right, so far so good. Okay, so public comment. I'm actually going to read some directions, and then I'll stop for a moment and we'll kind of go back and forth between the districts. Okay, so if you're a member of the public and wish to comment on a particular action item or on any other matter, I'm going to call on speakers starting with A&WSD, and I'll alternate between the two districts. Before speaking, we ask that you please state your name and town of residence and address remarks to the chairs, and limit your comments to 2 minutes. There's a lot of folks here, and we will not take comments during the action items. So please make use of this opportunity if you wish to comment on a particular action item. Okay, so public comment. Is there anyone from the A&WSD, a member of the A&WSD, who would like to make a public comment? It is okay if you do not. Okay, is there anybody from the MAUSD district who would like to make a public comment?
I would.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, I'm Brenda Tilburg. I'm a taxpayer in Bristol. I grew up in Proctor and I taught at Mount Abe for a while. One of the main reasons that we have been told that our district is pursuing some sort of consolidation with the Vergennes schools is to save money. Those of you who with long memories may remember that the original idea behind union schools, among other things, was to save money, and it didn't. when they started the Act 46 promotion by the state of Vermont, one of the early reasons for doing this was to save money, though they soon realized that it wouldn't particularly and stopped saying it. So eventually, one of the main reasons for consolidating with ANWSD is to save money. I would hope that it is set out very clearly where we are saving money and how much we are saving. Thank you.
Thank you. It's strange that I'm taking comment. Ms. Tilburg, thank you, but I'm just the person who was directed to lead this part. Thank you. I believe there's a hand raised, and it's a person named Nancy Cornell.
Yes, thank you. I am a member of the MAUSD Community Engagement Committee, and I live in Starksboro. And many, many years ago, I got my first teaching job as an English teacher at Virgins Union High School. Anyway, I'm wanting to speak to you about a couple of action items that are in front of you tonight. The study committee that you've decided to convene, I think, can be a committee that studies a wide range of ways for the two districts to collaborate in a way that supports students and saves funds. And that to me is so encouraging, especially because as John pointed out, we have a history of successful collaboration between our two districts. At the same time, I'm very concerned that the draft charge that you're considering tonight is too narrow and too limiting. I would think that the study committee would certainly want to explore other cost-saving options for sharing functions and personnel that could be accomplished without the need to formally merge, without the need to abolish the two boards to form one board, and without the need to change ownership of all school property in both districts. The charge that is drafted as written focuses only on the study of formally merging. And it seems to me that the final version of the charge should explicitly empower the committee you're about to form to study a broad array of collaborative options, including sharing personnel and functions without merging. In keeping with that change that I would strongly recommend, the name of this committee should be the ANWSD and MAUSD Study Committee rather than the Merger Study Committee. Whether the study committee's recommendations in the end includes merging or not, it also seems to me that the draft timeline needs to be changed so that it requires an affirmative vote of each school district board before anything is sent to Montpelier or anything is sent to voters for approval. Nothing in the statute precludes that important step of getting a vote of both boards. And in the end, if the recommendation is that the study committee comes up with is a recommendation for specific collaborative steps that don't require merging, there will be no need to get approval from Montpelier, but it will be important to have an affirmative vote from each school district board before proceeding. So those are the two areas of changes that I would strongly recommend, and I hope that both boards will consider those changes tonight.
Thank you. Is there anyone else is there anybody else out there in the public who would like to make a comment? Please just raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm raising my, I can't.
Okay, go ahead.
But this is Herb Olson. Is it okay to speak right now, John?
Yeah, please do. That's fine. And if you would also just say where you live. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I live in Starksboro. We've lived here for quite a little bit. Two sons went through Robinson, Mount Abe, and now they've flown the coop, that sort of thing. So I echo Nancy's remarks. I think that sort of process is pretty important. One of the things that we're thinking about is, how to stage some of this, so that, if merge right away, start some collaboration, try to find ways to find some efficiencies. That's good stuff. And that's really, what I think is important and very encouraging about you folks coming together. It's how can we, use our, resources to provide more help for our students in terms of their educational opportunities. The one issue that I wanted to point out, and I'm not sure whether this has been an issue in your district, but it certainly has been in ours, is the Articles of Agreement in the MAUSD Articles of Agreement explicitly talk about towns having a right to vote before the elementary school where in the town is going to be closed. And some towns might want to do that. It's quite possible, as enrollment goes down, that folks might think that's really a better idea. But it's enshrined in our Articles of Agreement, and it's something that, I think a lot of people feel are pretty important. So it's something that I think both boards need to be mindful of in terms of your work, because if you're going to propose Articles of Agreement around merger, obviously you're going to deal with that issue. And I just wanted to alert you folks that that's a very important issue for a lot of folks over out of the Northeast. And I just finally, good luck, folks. It's a great endeavor. I'm sure it's not going to be easy. And you got folks like me who will be whining, complaining about this, that, and the other. But, I really do wish you well. It's a good endeavor. The overall purpose is how can we get more resources for kids' education? And that's a good thing. Thanks very much.
Is there anyone else out there who'd like to make a public comment? You can raise your hand.
I'm not seeing any, John.
Me either. All right, thank you all very much. I believe our superintendents have made a little presentation just to ground us in some current realities and a little bit about our process. And we'll take some comment and discussion after each one of those. So I'm sorry, Dawn, you were going to introduce them. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. So the presentation is on current realities and the study committee process, as John said. So we'll let Sheila and Patrick take it from here.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which has the presentation on it, and then we'll kind of walk through the various slides and then try to answer any questions that you folks have around that. All right, here we are. I can get cursor on the right screen. There we go. So just a little context setting. We've talked about some of this already in some of the opening remarks, but just sort of a side-by-side comparison of the two districts as they currently stand, looking at when we unified under Act 46, enrollment, et cetera. And I think certainly what I notice when I look at this is the similarities between our districts and what we're seeing in terms of trending downward enrollment and trending upward in our projected expenses and the impact it may have on our staffing levels and what that could mean for educational outcomes, given what those trajectories are looking like. Sheila, I'll give you a minute to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the slide sort of speaks for itself. I think the only difference really in how we have historically communicated about our budget is is in the last line. It seems that in MAUSD, you've made it more or less your goal to stay under the spending threshold. We have more or less approached our budgeting through, sort of a level funding effort. So just how we're communicating about the bottom line there is just a little bit different from each slide. But it, as Patrick says, tells the same story. We are not below the spending threshold now, if not for debt service credits and the incentive from merger. So that's the only thing that gets us under the threshold.
And as we continue with the context setting, John spoke to most of these, maybe all of these in his opening remarks. This is just, again, showing those examples of our historical cooperation between the two districts. Perhaps the one thing that John didn't mention was a shared pre-K coordinator, which we also happen to share with Addison Central as well. So that's a county-wide share for that position. Anything you want to add here, Sheila?
Nope, I don't think so. I mean, no, I think we're good.
All right. So these are the statutes. They were included in the agenda for tonight. These kind of lay out a pretty specific process for a pretty specific committee. This is specifically Title 16 VSA 706 study committee, which, presuming that is the official committee that is being formed tonight, that has a pretty specific process that it needs to follow. That committee has statutory authority for certain things that's important to understand, and these statutes speak to that. In addition, a less formal document, the study committee school board relationship document, tries to help articulate in plainer language some of the authority that study committee has, which is considerable. The study committee, there was a comment earlier about requiring a school board vote before something might go to the state. In reading this document, there's nothing that requires that from a statutory standpoint. In fact, I think it says if each school board wanted to vote on it, there's nothing that precludes that, but it would not be a binding vote. It would simply be an advisory vote of each of those school boards that the study committee could consider as they were weighing whether or not to submit something to the State Board of Education. So these statutes become really important to familiarize yourselves with and understand what that process is. Now, rather than go through each of these, I thought this might create an opportunity for any questions that came up as folks were reading these, or thoughts folks wanted to share regarding any of these statutes.
But I think at this point, we'll start with MAUSD this time. Are there any Mount Abraham members who have questions? And I'm going to try and scroll through and find you out. Dave, I see your hand up, Dave Sharp.
So with regard to comments made by Herb Olson and Brenda Tilburg, I'm wondering if, and Nancy Cornell, I'm wondering if what is set before us is the notion of a specific single alternative of creating a single school district, or whether the notion of merger can be broader than that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Dave. I guess my thinking on that would be there's nothing that in the statute that certainly requires the study committee to find that a merger is the preferred action or is advisable, which to me, I think would allow for an alternative to merger as something that could be advisable. So I think, merger is sort of the, I guess, most extreme, for lack of a better term, type of relationship that the two districts could have is to form a single new district. But that doesn't mean that what this committee learns in that process could fall short of that, but enhance our relationship beyond where it currently is, which I think is what I was hearing folks say. So I don't think this prohibits a less formal sort of enhancement of our relationship.
Okay, and I saw Rob Backlund, but now he's moved.
I basically had the same question as Dave. I didn't know, looking at the language, if this study committee would have to specifically look at forming a union school district versus considering maybe a supervisory union relationship or another term. So thanks, Patrick.
Any other questions from Mount Abraham Board?
Okay. Is it okay if we jump in, Dawn?
Sure.
Sure. All right. Anybody from AWSD? We got Bill. You're up first.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to reflect on, I had a chance to say this at our last meeting before this joint meeting, so I'll say it here too quickly. If we vote to create a study committee, in looking at these statutes, and I think as Patrick just illustrated for us, that study committee becomes its own entity outside of these two school boards. And so it no longer is a school board project or a school board committee. It becomes its own committee with its own statutes backing it up and its own process. And I'm not saying that that it's a bad thing. I just think we need to make sure we go into this understanding that if we vote to create this study committee, then the study committee really acts very autonomously from either of our boards and does its thing and comes back with its recommendations. And so I just wanted to make sure that was something that struck me. It wasn't what I had expected at first, but that is how this process is set up. And I understand and appreciate that now. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody else?
Marcus has his hand up. John.
Okay, Mark, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go for it.
That's okay. I just wanted to agree with what Patrick was just saying. The way I read this is if the study committee were to decide an actual merger is the way to go, then we've already got this process in place, that the formal statutorial required committee is in place. They don't have to come to that conclusion though. But we wouldn't want them to do an informal study, say, yes, we should form, and then have to start from scratch to make sure they're statutorily in line. So this just gets that part of the process in place, which may or may not be used at the end of the day.
All right. Anybody else from our district? I'd like to point one thing out that I thought was really important and helpful for me, because I know our board was, like, we want some answers to a question, right? Is this good or is this not good? Show us some data. How's that going to work, right? I mean, that's and tell it to us and answer that question. And one of the things in that relationship between the board and the study committee was this notion of that on the bottom paragraph that said, before completing its final report, the study committee is required to transmit the report and articles to the school boards. Like, we have to review and comment. We're going to get it. And that's really helpful for me in terms of the relationship between us and another board. I know, so Chris, you have your hand up. You were actually the chair of ours, Act 46 study committee. I'm sure you have some things to say about that as well. Jump on in, please.
I was. Thanks, John, for recognizing that. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but we already had a supervisory union at the time, and we were looking to form a unified school district. There's no supervisory union in place at this point. Wouldn't it make sense to actually change that charge to include other options so that they can explore some different avenues instead of just being locked into a unified school district, which is a much different type of organization than supervisory union? My thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else from ANWSD? We'll kind of open it up here for a moment. Any other comments? We have some more process that Sheila and Patrick will lead us through, and we'll have more room for some more conversation at that time as well. But anybody want to jump in here? Okay.
All right, ready for a few more slides? All right, so just sort of a quick overview of the process. So each board has voted to form a study committee, and that's sort of what brought us here together tonight. And we're here tonight at this joint meeting where it's important to establish the charge, as you saw the draft, and it is definitely a draft. That's something that you should be thinking about what changes might need to be made to that. We need to talk about a budget. If the budget does exceed 25,000, that requires voter approval. And the cost sharing of that budget in a 706 merger study committee or study committee is prescribed. It's based on equalized pupil count. You also need to determine the number of members that would be on the committee, which is also the representation is also based on the equalized pupil count. And then it's really a matter of thinking about how do we get the invitation out there, setting the participation, like what's the date for people to announce their interest by, when are people going to be appointed, how are they going to be appointed, et cetera. And then you can see the representation is 39% Addison Northwest and 61% Mount Abraham. That's how the dollars would be split, and that's how the representation of the seats would be split. And then from there, the committee's formed. The committee works for several months. I think Chris mentioned earlier how much work it is. I know there are several people here that were on Act 46 study committees, and you know full well how much work it really is. I know those committees, when that study was happening for our districts before, put so much time and energy and thought into data collection, into the analysis, into the presentation of that information. It is a lot of work. There's no understating that. So that committee does its work, and it drafts reports, right? It drafts an articles of agreement that they may decide should be sent to the State Board of Ed if it's advisable to form a district. If not, then that doesn't go to the State Board of Ed, and the study committee makes that determination. They then submit that report. If they decide it goes to that point, the State Board of Ed would approve it, and then it comes back to our communities for a vote. It would be a yes from the commingled votes in Addison Northwest and a yes from the commingled votes of Mount Abraham Unified. That would create a yes that we are merging. It's not town by town, it's district by district. And each district has to vote yes. If one district votes no, it's a failed vote and it doesn't advance. So that's just sort of a brief overview of what that process looks like. As far as timeline, this is all assuming that we're going to shoot for the potential merger for FY24. So it's really working backward from that assumption. It is a pretty aggressive timeline. And again, this is a draft. This is, and it is not something that the boards can necessarily hold the merger study accountable to, right? This is sort of I think John was referring to this earlier. This is what we're trying to do to make clear to the study committee. This is what we'd like to shoot for. And in order to shoot for this, here's a proposal on the steps along the way that can keep us progressing toward that desired July 1st, 23 start. Has us here in April with this joint meeting. And then really, realistically, probably June, getting that committee formed and starting their work. And that will leave 7 months or so for that study group to do their work. Again, folks that were involved in this Act 46 study committee knows that will be an intense 7 months. 7 months is relatively compressed. The advantage we have is we do have articles of agreement for each of our districts already. I think there's some legwork that we could probably look to that will help with this process. So 7 months, I think, is reasonable, but still aggressive. I don't want to, sugarcoat that at all. It will be a lot of work over the course of 7 months. And that presumes that January of 22, sending the articles of agreement to the state board. We get those back, and then we have a warned opportunities for people to come and hear more about it, ask questions, share concerns, share excitement, etc. And that would lead up to a March town meeting day of 22 vote. And then that allows time for a revote if that's necessary, allows time for the 30 days for the vote to be confirmed, et cetera, et cetera. And upon a confirmed vote, then a lot of work also then starts again in terms of actually making the merger happen and creating one entity out of two. That is also pretty monumental amount of work. And this timeline allows for about 15 months to make that transition, which I think is, in particular, depending on how it goes, right? If this means we move where middle schoolers and high schoolers go, that's a big process. It doesn't have to do that. We can keep operating grades in the buildings that they currently exist in and merge. So there are a lot of different ways we could look at the end of a merger. And some of them are more complicated than others, and ensuring that we have this timeline of a year or better to make those changes seems really important from my perspective as we think about what it would take to do that and do that well. So that's an idea of a possible timeline. And that may be a good place. Maybe we'll pause there and talk about process and timeline for a minute, and then we can get into membership and wrap this up.
Dawn, would you like to go first?
Sure. Are there any Mount Abraham school board members who have comments they would like to make? Dave Sharp, I see your hand up. Thanks for using your electronic can, because I'm having to scroll through 5 at a time to find you all.
Thank you, Don. So a couple of things. The cost of going through this of 25,000, and I'm wondering, during the Act 46 process, the Agency of Education provided considerable support, and I'm wondering if there's been any communication with the Agency of Education as to whether support from the agency is possible or probable. And then my other question is, if we were to hire a facilitator like Nate Levison or someone else, what would be a realistic cost of hiring a facilitator? Has that been broached at any point?
Sure, I can speak to both of those a little bit. So we have reached out to the AOE to see what sort of funds are available and see what kind of financial support may exist. And the answer is none. So there's no financial support from the Agency of Education for this work. With regard to a facilitator, Sheila and I have talked about this. I've been working to reach out and find a facilitator. I haven't yet found one, so I can't speak to what the cost might be, because they I'm sure charge different rates. Nate would charge something more than a more local person might, et cetera. What I have inquired about is what has to be included in that budget of 25,000 if we think about that figure. Because the statute's really unclear about what has to be and what it doesn't have to be included in that. As Sheila and I have talked, and as I've sent some emails to folks at the Agency of Education, our thinking is that the 25,000 would be almost exclusively, perhaps exclusively, dedicated to the cost of a facilitator. And it feels reasonable to start with that figure. And that very well could be, and again, it's hard to know without knowing the frequency and duration of meetings, et cetera. but we feel like that's a pretty reasonable starting point to cover facilitator costs.
Thank you.
Dawn, I don't know how to do a electronic hand.
Okay, Brad.
Right. Yeah, I just quick question. I was wondering about the process that would be employed to develop the charge. I mean, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think part of that process is tonight, right? So this there was a group of folks that met in preparation for this meeting and sort of started with a draft with that group and kind of kicked that draft around a little bit to have something for this group to react to. So the intent was to have a draft for this group to review tonight. We can make edits to that draft, and then each board tonight would approve the charge. So that's sort of the process. Get the draft to where each board can live with that tonight, and then approve it. And the draft charge that you see came from, might be the Montpelier-Roxbury merger under Act 46, as we look for some samples to work from. So it kind of pulled from that, and many of the charges around Act 46 merger studies were left pretty broad as the draft charge that you see is.
Okay, I think, John, I see oh, wait, Rob Backlund has his hand up. Rob?
Can't
You're
hear you,
muted, Rob.
Can't see you.
You hit unmute, but I still can't hear.
Oh,
sorry.
Dave, is your hand up from before? Yeah, okay.
George Gardner's hand is also up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. We'll jump over George and then Tom. George, you're muted.
Patrick, I'm confused. You said that that the possibility of different resolutions of the committee is that we would maintain everyone at their present location. And I don't see that that would be a positive solution for the committee to come up with. Can you explain why you feel that that's a possible ending?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a good idea. I just think it's possible for a single school district to operate multiple secondary schools and multiple elementary schools. In many parts of the country, in bigger systems, one school district has dozens of high schools, or at least multiple high schools. So we could end up being that way as well. So we could be a merged district that operates a 7 through 12 middle high school in Vergennes and a 7 through 12 middle high school in Bristol. And that we could still be merged at that point, but that could be what we look like. We could also merge and have grades 6 through 8 in Vergennes and 9 through 12 in Bristol, or vice versa. So I just wanted to be sure that it's clear that a merger doesn't necessarily mean that there are other structural changes at the school level.
I understand what you're saying about the possibility of partial in one and partial in the other, but if we were going to maintain the same division that we presently have, why would we merge?
Well, for one, you would reduce the central office costs, right? So you'd be merging those central office functions and consolidating administrative costs.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
I think it's, sorry, I've a comment about, or 1.5 comments about the relationship between the board and the study committee, particularly in relationship to questions of time that Patrick was just talking about. this study committee does, once we charge it, the study committee is out of our hands, and any comments that we make are advisory. I mean, that's what you said, and that's what the language seems to say. And they may, and they may say, you know, my gosh, this is just way too much to do in 6.5 months. And so I think we should recognize that that is the case. I think we should also note that the study committee will have at least one member from each of our boards. And so it's not like we just send them off into the world and and have no possible way of communicating with it. Hopefully there will be some degree of communication. Maybe it's just one way, maybe that those school board members are communicating to us, but those school board members will hopefully be able to communicate to the committee the kind of broader concern we have about both financial constraints and maximizing educational opportunities for our children in such a way that we can rest assured that the study committee will take seriously the concerns that we have, both in terms of time and also the goals of the two boards in even embarking on this process.
And I might just emphasize the at least part of that comment, Tom, that at least one board member from each board would be on the committee. It could be more than that.
I have a question. It's kind of simple, but it's for Patrick and Sheila and really Chris or anybody else who was on the study committee prior to this. Does the study committee have to take minutes and post an agenda and follow open meeting law?
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
Good. And why do they have to do that?
I can take it at.
Yeah.
If a committee is formed by a board, they are in fact an arm of the board, and so they are required to follow the same rules that a board would follow.
And they become their own entity. Yeah. So and so minutes will have to be posted. The community will all know when all of the meetings are happening by this committee. There will be time for will they have to take public comment? I mean, all of those kinds of things will have to occur during the process. I think that's just really important. That's important for me to note that, like, what will they do? You know, can we get this committee going and then, you know, they meet off to the side and don't tell anyone when they're meeting and kind of do it behind closed doors? And really, that's an impossibility for that group. And I think that's really important for me to feel good about this. Yeah.
And one extension to that, John, is when that committee has its organizational meeting and they identify a chair or co-chairs, if that ends up being the direction they go, that chair or co-chairs has to communicate with the Secretary of Education and let the secretary know, you know, hey, this is happening, we're formed, I'm the chair. So there's even that level of knowledge of the activity of that group at the state level.
Thanks.
I see Steve Rooney has his hand up.
Just in terms of the following, you know, open meeting law, I think in one of these statutes, it says the committee is a public body pursuant to 1 VSA 310.3, which I'm assuming means you have to follow open.
Right. Rob, did you get your video or your audio back yet? I can't see where he is. John, it looks like Tom has his hand up.
Okay, Tom, you're back up. And then we'll move along here, everyone. We can still bring up lots of questions as we move along.
I just had a question about the budget, and I apologize for asking a second time. And if it's not the right time to talk about it, I'm curious about the budget. I know there's an action item about it, but I understood you to say, Patrick, that up to $25,000, and most of that would go to a facilitator. So that means no legal costs, for example, would be available for the committee in case it needed to consult with a lawyer or something else. Is that right?
Yeah, so the question, do you want to go ahead, Sheila? Yeah.
Oh, I think you're probably going to say what I would say. Go right ahead.
So I posed that question directly to the AOE to try and get clarity on the statute and what has to be or what doesn't have to be included in that $25,000 figure. And I specifically said, you know, each district already has budgets for legal. We've already started the work of engaging with a transportation consultant. So a lot of these things are already in the works and kind of in motion. And I asked, do those expenses have to be included in the budget specifically for a merger study committee? The response I got wasn't super helpful. It was from the legal at AOE saying the statute is really unclear. The person who responded said that what I suggested we were thinking about around this budget was sort of acceptable from her perspective, but she wanted another person to weigh in on it. And after a couple of attempts trying to get that other person to weigh in on it, we haven't heard back yet. So that's the extent of what we have now, but that's why we're thinking there may be some other costs related to this that are already accounted for in our budgets and in different degrees, perhaps already in motion in some way.
So the study committee might reasonably borrow school board resources to do their work.
Presumably, that's what we're still trying to get further clarity on, but that's our thinking at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Don, let's move along. We're going to have opportunities for more conversation as we get to the action items.
So just, I know a member of the community has her hand up, and I just wanted to remind her that she can go to the link in the to the parking lot to write that down, because we're not going to take public comment at this time. We're just going to keep going. So if you want to put it in the link to the parking lot that'll be recorded, and then we'll take a look at it.
Thank you. I think it was back to Patrick or Sheila to talk about possibilities for committee membership.
Right. So one of the decisions you need to make tonight is what is this committee membership going to look like? And you have some options. I think, you know, ultimately, as Patrick already identified, the representation on this committee has to mirror the size of our district. So approximately 61% of the committee needs to be MAUSD community members or board members, and 39% ANWSD. So the bullets that follow after the third bullet are just examples of what that would look like if you want an 8-member committee, a 10-member committee, 13, 15, and so on. So, you know, consideration from your end is sort of how big should this committee be in general, and or what representation, you know, best meets what you have in mind in terms of carrying out the work. There's a case to be made for too big, too small. You know, so you'll have some important dialogue, I think, about this. As you've already noted, at least one member from each district has to be a board member. And ultimately here tonight, you'll have to decide, you know, some of these specifics before sending out communication to the public, trying to engage others in investing in this work. So through an invitation to be part of this committee. So this is sort of first step decision-making around that. So, you know, I think ultimately there's not much more to talk about here other than this is a task, you know, set out before you tonight to kind of decide. And then once you've made this decision, we should talk more about the timeline for inviting others to become part of this committee.
Are we going to stop here, Sheila, or is there some more that we can get in?
I mean, I can elaborate on the sort of invitation part of it. I mean, I think in terms of, you know, kind of trying to mirror the invitation with the timeline that Patrick already laid out, I think we'd want to get something posted out to the community once you decide what you're looking for, you know, within the next couple of weeks. So committing to sending an invitation out broadly through Front Porch Forum, through the websites, that kind of thing, by May 7th, you know, getting something out in the next couple of weeks. Identify sort of what is this committee, and, you know, kind of that timeline. Meetings would begin when, and, you know, setting out through the charge what the work of this committee would be and the proposed timeline. And we've kind of already acknowledged this is just a proposed timeline at this point. That study committee could get together and decide, you know, to change that, modify that timeline once they get underway with their work. But I think that once you've kind of nailed down some of those pieces, sent it out to the community, we'd want to give time, a few weeks for people to get back to the board chairs on this. So I think that we would invite people to express their interest directly to the board chairs. And then each of the boards in their June meeting could identify who those interested people are and appoint, you know, that membership at their first meeting in June, so that we'd have solidified who's on this committee by mid-June, I would say. That makes sense? I think writing the invitation is not the hard part. It's nailing down all of the decisions that need to go into that to inform people about what it is they're agreeing to do.
Are there any other slides, or this is it? Okay. Then Don, I'll let you get started with our last bit of conversation, and then we'll move to action items, and then we'll do the same kind of thing, everyone. Folks, we're going to talk together, then we'll make sure we feel good about an action item, and then we'll vote individually. Okay. So go ahead, Don.
I see Sarah LaPearl has her hand up with a question.
Hi, thanks. When I was on the Acts 46 committee for MAUSD, and we did have members of central office, that including our acting superintendent and then our new superintendent. And I was just curious what participation central office, et cetera, would be playing in this, or maybe even faculty or staff, or that kind of engagement with the community.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess I'll speak for myself. It was my assumption as superintendent that I would be participating. I'm not an official committee member, but I would be actively engaged in supporting the work of the committee. And I think in speaking for the others in central office, they would be as well. You know, that study committee will have questions, you know, about finances or support services or other questions that only those in the central office could answer, right? So bringing back, doing the research and bringing back whatever it is the community or the committee needs to do their work.
And I would agree. And so and you mentioned other staff, thinking about teachers and whatnot, Sarah. I see it as there are the voting members of the committee, and then there are the resource folks that support that committee. I consider myself and everyone else in central office a resource. Potentially having teachers speak could be a resource. And potentially a teacher could be on the study committee as a voting member because they live in the community. So people, I think, could wear different hats in different ways, and some of that depends on who's selected to be part of that. I think what's interesting, as I was listening to Sheila talk, part of what will also be required to provide the committee with the information they need is collaboration with our two central offices, right? So Sheila's central office on their own, or our central office on our own, couldn't produce probably the information the study committee is going to need to look at this as a collective. Our business managers are going to have to work closely together. Our curriculum people are going to have to work closely together, et cetera, to share that information. So that will be interesting. And we do a lot of that work already. So that's how I see that materializing.
Okay. Anybody from Dave? Okay, go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Thank you. are we deciding tonight the size of the committee? What decision points are we making? The size of the committee and what the budget is?
We have 4 action items before us. The charge and timeline, the committee makeup, which is what you just asked about, and the kind of the timeline for that invitation, whether we will secure a facilitator or not, right? We need to decide together, like, do we want a facilitator? And then a budget. Those are the 4 things that we have to get done tonight. If we don't get if we don't get those done, we're going to have a hard time.
So in that regard, I've worked in a committee of 11 that was quite a good number to work with. So I'm inclined to look at, between 10 and 13 of the proposals that the staff has put forward. Maybe 12, maybe 10, whatever. But I'm inclined in that sort of size.
I would think you'd want an odd number of committee members for obvious reasons.
So in general, I agree, but I don't think it applies in this case.
Okay.
Just
anybody from ANWSD? We're kind of at a pause here, and then we're going to have another conversation specifically about the charge in just a moment. Any other conversation about what we've heard so far? Any questions that you feel need to be answered? Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to move into this section where we're going to think about these 4 items that I just mentioned. As I said before, like, again, we're going to talk together and have a discussion. Look at something that might be possible. Talk about what choices, see what we can get to about consensus, and then ultimately the boards themselves, our individual boards, have to make a vote and a motion on those items. But we know we have to do these things. So let's talk about the committee charge first. Do you want to share your screen, Patrick?
John, while he's sharing that, I just wanted to let you know that I'm not able to open the link to the parking lot because I don't have permissions. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll share it to you afterward. I'll share it with you afterwards. Thank you.
Okay.
Unless you want me to share it with you right now, I can go in there.
No, but in the meantime, the community members from each district or our district can send the questions to me and I'll make sure they get into that parking lot.
Okay. Oh, they should be able to just open the link and submit it there, I hope.
Yeah, I couldn't get either to work.
Okay, all right. If you have a question, folks, don't let technology stop you. Send it directly to me or Dawn. Let's not let that get in our way. All right. So what you want to get started here, or at least let's read them. The school boards. This is the draft, everyone. A draft. The school boards of ANWSD and MAUSD have chosen to come together to form a study committee to analyze the advisability of forming a unified school district. The committee's work will be completed within a time frame that will allow for a vote on a proposed plan by town meeting day 2022. So at this juncture, we've talked a little bit about timing. We haven't heard anybody saying, one way or the other, but we do have a couple of comments about the word unified, and perhaps changing that word so that it's more open for what the possibilities for the committee can. Are there any other? I'll turn it over to you, Dawn, to allow some conversation from your board.
Yeah. Gosh, I wish I could see everybody. I'm just going to go back to our list and run through it. Sarah LaPearl, do you have any comments about the charge?
Currently, no.
Okay. How about Liz?
No comment.
Okay. How about Brad?
I don't have a major comment. I'm kind of new to all this, so I feel a little bit hamstrung, but I'm just in thinking about some of the comments that previously made by Nancy, Herb, and Dave Sharp, I believe. The language of this that I'm looking at on my screen pretty much narrows the scope of the, of the study committee. It sort of presumes that there even would be a vote, and does not sort of, accommodate the notion that there might not even be a vote. So it just seems to, in my view, really limit the, sort of point the committee in a particular direction, which I'm not sure that's really what is required at this point.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Steve?
Yeah, I guess I would echo that sentiment. I mean, saying to analyze either the advisability of forming a unified school district or other collaborative resource sharing arrangements would seem to be a more appropriate, would sort of encompass some of the comments we've heard.
Okay. All right, Kevin.
I'm not really too hung up on the language. Even though it does seem narrow scope, for this group to come up with something other than a conclusion to form a unified school district just means that there has to be another path going down, because I think there is a statute that lines out what different school districts are required to do to basically have a cooperative situation, if you will. So, and I'm not hung up on changing the wording or not changing the wording, but I think I'm not sure it's a big deal, given that there is some narrow scope here, but there doesn't preclude any discussion to do something else. And that something else would require another set of actions.
Don, along those lines, can I just share some thinking around that? So this presumes we're talking about specifically a 706 study committee, like 16 VSA 706, which a study committee formed under that statute only has authority to determine merger is advisable or merger's not advisable. That study committee wouldn't have authority to decide something else. They may recommend something else, but that decision-making authority of the something else gets kicked back to the boards. So that may be, I think that's why this is narrowed, because it presumes a 706 specific study committee.
Thank you, Patrick. Dave, did you have any other comments?
Yeah, I would suggest striking the words from forming after that to further merging our two districts. That's the phrase I would put in there. And if it means that we're no longer a 706 district, maybe the restraints on our $25,000 spending go away.
Thank you. Rob, do you have your mic back?
Do I? I don't know.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree with, I guess statutorily, if we're hamstrung and we can't think outside the box, I see this as a self-fulfilling prophecy for this merger study committee, that they're only going to be then looking at a unified school district, or that's where their energy would be focused with this charge. I'd like to keep it broader personally. I agree with Steve and with Dave. So I guess maybe I need more clarification on sort of the law specifically, because if this is putting us down only one avenue, I think I don't want to limit at this point.
Okay, and Krista.
Yep, I do have similar concerns about being led down one path and the committee being kind of constrained by just looking at that one path. So if there's a way to broaden the language and still allow the committee to consider that, as well as other options, I'd be appreciative to know what that would look like.
Okay. John, you want to hear from your board?
Sure. How about any Tom, Lori, Bill? Any? I'll kind of just go down, make sure that everybody has a chance to jump in. Tom, Lori, Bill, do you have anything you'd like to jump in here?
I do. Oh, go ahead, Tom. I think I hear you.
No, after you, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yeah, just this is a 706. It's 16 VSA 706. We can create a charter for it. I think it's a good thing to do for guidance. I'm okay with the language that some of the Mount Abe reps were suggesting adding to keep it a little more open-ended. I would definitely support that. But I think in the end, it doesn't matter because the law gives us the authority to establish the committee, fix the number of members, and set a budget. Beyond that, anything else, as I think Tom mentioned earlier, is just advisory. So, I'm not super worried about the charter because their first order of business could be to ignore it and create their own. So I don't think that would happen. I think we should try to give them a good starting point, but that's my 2 cents on it. Thanks.
Tom, Lori?
Bill put it perfectly. Thank you, Bill.
Nice. Lori, anything? It's okay if no.
I don't have anything. Thanks, John.
Sure. How about Martha and Kirsten and George? George, you have your hand up, and then maybe Martha and Kirsten.
I only have a concern about the crunch timeline. I think that it might, in order to do it right, longer than that. And I feel that this is such an important thing. It's a big move for both districts that we shouldn't condense the timeline to the point where the result is a rushed one.
Thank you. Kirsten,
I'm okay with how things are. I personally would like to see a larger committee so that we can just get different, people representing, our town, our
Thank you.
district.
Martha?
I agree with Kirsten on the larger committee. I think a good chairperson would be able to handle a larger amount of people. And I think it will be, to me, it's important that everyone or every town or city gets to have some input. I also keep hearing about adding in this other options, or to explore other options. And I just want to clarify, with our board, we agreed that we would explore other options on our own. Is that correct, John? Or is that what's being referred to here when we're saying?
Well, regardless of whether we have a study committee, we're going to see declining enrollment and we're going to see increased costs, and our board has to deal with it ourselves. And I'm certain that Mount Abe will do the same thing. But we can't answer these questions without doing it together. So yes, you're absolutely right. We still have our own work to do.
Yeah. Okay.
How about Chris, Amy, Mark?
Yeah, I think I already spoke to this a little bit. I agree with Bill and many of our colleagues over in the Mount Abe School District that I think that we need to broaden the language of this, just to give a little bit of flexibility for some other models, such as a supervisory union or just recommendations on cost sharing measures. Thank you.
Amy?
I agree too with broadening and just having a little more open-ended language. And also like the ideas of the bigger numbers, just given our size being smaller, I think it would be nice to have at least 15 members there, so we can have 6 representatives and hopefully hit a good cross-section of the community. other than that, nothing else.
Thank you. Mark?
I think it's important to remember that the members of this study committee are not going to be in a vacuum. Many of them are sitting on this call right now. It's gonna be at least a couple of us or a couple of board members on it. And I would assume those that are interested enough to sit on a Monday night, and watch a Zoom call are going to throw their names in the hat as potential committee members. So they know what we're thinking about. They realize that it's not going to walk into this blind, see the one sentence and say, oh, we're stuck only with this. Being said, I think you could also add or create recommendations of other means of collaboration, something of that nature. But this is locked into the statute. And the only reason I see to do that is just to save a step at a later date. I like the fact of having a fast timeline, A, because I think this work needs to be done sooner rather than later, but B, as has already been said, this study committee is not stuck with anything we tell it to do once we let it go. So if it gets a few months into the process and said, this is not going to work, we are not going to hit these numbers, so be it. They'll change to hit a timeline that they like and can work and do the work that they need to do. They're not going to spend the time and put together something that's going to be sloppy. So I have trust in the people we're going to select to put on this.
Thanks.
Well, one more thing, the community can also be able to talk public records or public comments and be able to talk to the various representatives. While I like the idea of larger can kind of bog down, and I would, if we're going to try and go fast, I think nimble is better. So I would be more in a 10 to 13 with the understanding that there are resources out there and voices will be heard, but you're limiting the number of votes, not the number of voices. Thanks.
Keith and Christina.
Just like to voice my support for broadening the language as well. I think it's important from the outset to have our intentions be communicated with absolute clarity, if only for the sake of the community further on down the line. And I would agree with Mark, a 10 to 13 range sounds pretty good for our committee.
Christina?
Yeah, so I guess the way I've been looking at this study committee is a tool for both of our districts to really investigate a merger for us and let us know if they think it's a great idea or not. Broadening the language, I just think that both our boards simultaneously, we're going to be working on, vigorously working on examining as many other ideas and options as we can. That's our work. And I kind of, so I think it goes hand in hand with this study committee. So I'm not sure broadening it is necessary because our boards are going to be doing that work in conjunction with study committee looking at a merger. I'd be in favor of a minimum of a 13-member committee. Like Mark just said, I think the timeline is a great starting place. And if we find the committee needs more time, we give it to them. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. So Dawn, back and forth here just a little bit. I have a proposal, everyone. I want to suggest that we change the word unified to union. And I want to do that because it mirrors exactly the language in 706. And it helps us because when we hear unified, I think that we hear SD, okay? And it takes us away from even the possibility of an SU or any other possibility. And it more closely aligns with union. And that's the one proposal that I think will help us and help everyone out. Broaden this language just a little bit. Now, if anybody else has a proposal for what else they would like to write, that's fine.
Steve Bruni has his hand up.
So I know we've been talking about how the committee is kind of on their own once we form them a little bit, but we are writing them a charge, and I suspect that the charge will constrain them to some extent. Usually the committees are supposed to live within their charge. So if we say the committee's work will be completed, that's a pretty strong statement. And that's part of their charge. That's not just them being let loose to make up whatever time frame they want to, at least not in my mind. And so maybe we want to talk about that in more aspirational terms rather than as strictly as we're noting that initially.
Perhaps that's something as simple as the insertion of the word ideally to start it. Ideally, the committee's work will complete.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be less legalese.
Okay. I see one of Chris, you have your hand up. I don't know if it was from before or now. You're muted though. You're muted though. You're muted though, man.
That's terrible. I always make fun of those people. It's kind of just a tack on what I didn't say before. I mean, the very first meeting that we had as a study committee, we read the charge, and that governed our work going forward. Our committee also had 14 individuals, so I'm also in favor of a larger committee. It worked very well with us. We had great conversations without people being talked over. So yeah, I mean, however we need to do this to meet the legal obligations in this charge, but I do want it to be open to supervisory unions. I don't know how we have to make that language. I'm not a wordsmith, so I'll leave it up to the rest of you, but that's where I am. Thanks.
And just on that point, Chris, I think it's an interesting idea from an authority standpoint. I think the Secretary of Education is the person who has the authority to create a supervisory union. So I'm not sure, I'm just thinking from a process perspective, I don't think it's practical to assume this study committee could put together a recommendation to form a study committee or to form a supervisory union. I think that can only happen by act of the Secretary of Education. Sheila, I don't know if you have any more thoughts or knowledge on that.
No, I mean, I agree. I also feel like every other suggestion that comes up would be this committee advising against forming a unified, right? So if they come forward and say this option might work, then they're advising against, right? They've analyzed the advisability of forming a unified school district and concluded that it's not advisable, but this is an option instead, right? Like, so to me, it still fits. I think it's sort of to the point that Christina was making. I think it's human nature to try to go against sort of anything that seems to constrain, but in many ways, it's very efficient to say, this is the work you're doing. Please come back and tell us, bring us your work and tell us, do you advise this or do you not advise this? Because if they don't advise it, then you all know what your work is as boards, which would include all of the other things that you've already talked about. So, but I agree with what you just said. I think it is the Secretary of Education's job to make those other kinds of supervisory union decisions. That's not the work laid out in statute that I've seen.
And I think important to be reasonable in expectations, right? I think it's one thing to ask a committee to say whether or not merger is advisable. I think it's a very different ask, and I can appreciate wanting the answer to this. It's a very different ask to say, if not, then what do you think we should do?
Right. But it wouldn't be within their authority, right, to really make that as a recommendation necessarily. It's the board's work.
Good. We've got some questions here. I'll just, Dawn, is it okay if I?
Sure, go ahead.
Dave, why don't you go and then Mark's up.
Thank you. So as was brought out earlier, we're already merging activities between our two districts. It's a wonderful thing. The reason I proposed the language I did is so here's where we are now. And where do we want to go and how do we get there are the questions that we want this committee to answer. That's my perspective, rather than precluding where we want to get there. And then the work of the committee is just simply how do we get there? Let's say here's where we are. How do we enlarge our merger relationship in a way that's successful for both districts?
Go ahead, Mark.
I think we have to fall back on the statute. And if this is going to be a merger study committee under this statute, then it needs to be a very specific question being asked. And as Patrick and Sheila are saying, the advisability is a yes, no question then. So if it's yes, the committee is going to bring us, yes, it is, here's why. They say no, they're going to say, no, we don't think it's advisable, and here's why. And a lot of that here is why are going to be the recommendations of other things we could do. We don't think it's advisable to do it because ABC, but I think that by doing it together as both sides being part of this study group, we're going to get information that we are not going to find by separate boards doing the work on their own. So the negative advisability, we're going to learn information that might lead us to what other things we could do outside of things that weren't going to work as a true merged school district. So I think that even though it's a yes, no question, it does open up possibilities of other recommendations being informally presented to both boards at the end of the discussion.
Thanks. Sarah?
Hi, I kind of echo what Mark just said in that when I was on the Act 46 study committee as a community member, I really went into it not knowing how I felt about it and not knowing if I thought a merger or whatever we were doing, unifying our district, was a good idea. And I learned so much through that process and became extremely informed. And I think that right now, a lot of us are sitting on it, assuming that everybody who would want to be on something might, like it's a foregone conclusion. And I don't think it necessarily needed to be. Like, I think we actually talked it out a lot and studied it a lot in the process. And I assume the same thing would happen here. And I think it's easier to go in with a slightly narrower focus as we're and accept the general language as it stands to kind of answer the question, as you all have stated.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay. All right, everyone. We've got to get to a vote somehow. It's either we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. Okay. Is there anyone out there who does not like the change of one word from unified to union to mirror the language in the law? Is there anyone out there who's against saying something to the effect of ideally, or the committee's work will be completed within a time frame, that we have a hope here, that we desire that? Is there any other language out there by anybody who wants to put anything else that's got to be in there?
John, can I say something?
Yeah.
Brad. I mean, my sense is that, you know, on the second question, the ideally, I think that's fine. I personally have no problem with that. I do think I'm less sanguine about simply inserting the word union instead of unified. I don't think that reflects, the expressed opinions of a lot of people on this meeting that the language of the charge should be broadened somewhat. I I would suggest something more along the lines of, I think what Dave was suggesting, but maybe something like to analyze the advisability of, furthering the merger collaboration between the districts as the end of the first sentence.
Steve?
So I think your point in changing it to union is only that the statute actually uses the word union and it doesn't use the word unified. So I think that point is simply to make it link more directly to the statute, which I agree with. I still think there should be something at the end of that sentence that at least gives the people reading the charge the understanding that they can feel free to suggest other possibilities if they're not in favor of advising the full merger.
Okay. Maybe there's another sentence along the lines of this does not preclude the committee from making other recommendations. Tom, go ahead. Christina, we're working hard here, people.
So
And then Kevin.
this is kind of small, but what about to analyze the advisability of forming a union school district or not? To make explicit that is the question in the way that Sheila noted. And so if it is not, then the committee can come up with something else. But if like I get the concern about not foreclosing other options, but I think if it's just explicit, so that's my suggestion. I don't know if people want, but.
Okay, Christina?
I guess I'm just going to echo what I said before about, I feel pretty strongly that it's up to our individual boards to do the other work that Steve and Brad are talking about, or the further investigating on how we could further collaborate, but maybe not merge. That to me is the work of our boards as we look at this next year and how we're going to get through the next year financially and what we have to do. So the study committee really is a targeted charge. Yes, we're going to merge, or no, we're not going to merge, and this is why. Thank you.
Kevin?
I just want to remind, as a reminder, this committee is being formed underneath certain state statutes, and that's where their authority lies, is recommending the formation of a unified district. If they decide not to recommend forming a unified district and going forward with that process, anything they do or say, which may be important to the respective boards to consider, they don't have any responsibility or authority to come up with those alternatives. So I mean, I'm kind of on the fence here, but I don't think changing the language to express more options necessary. I do agree with the union as opposed to unified, but if, in my point of view, if we were to add anything to this, we would have them report out other considerations, if you will, or something like that, if they choose not to recommend going forward with a unified district. But once they say, no, we're not going to go forward with a unified district, their job's done.
Okay. So breaking new ground here, folks. I say we vote. I think we'll try to make some language. We'll see we see how we do, and then you all can see how you do. We're either going to have a short meeting or we're going to keep this going. So I'm going to ask the A&W-SD, we're going to go first. So would somebody make a motion to try to incorporate all of the things that you just heard as best as you can, and we'll see what we can do.
I can give it a go if you want me to try, John.
Please.
So I move that the school boards of Addison Northwest School District and Mount Abraham Unified School District have agree to form a study committee to analyze the advisability of forming a union school district. The committee's work will ideally be completed within a time frame that will allow a vote on a proposed plan by town meeting day 2022.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion. Kevin, wait, Kevin, you still have your hand up. You can't discuss right now. Chris, go for it.
So was the only change there ideally?
Ideally in union. We changed unified to union.
Thanks.
Well, and I did change from have chosen to come together to will form or agree to form.
Anybody else? Chris, you still have your hand up. You want to still jump in?
I don't know.
Hey, John, it's Lori. Can you,
Hey, Lori.
Can you have Glory read back what she's got as the motion, please?
Glory, will you read it back?
The school board of ANWSD and MAUSD agreed to form a study committee to analyze the advisability of forming a union school district. The committee's work will ideally be completed within a time frame that will allow a vote on a proposed plan by town meeting day 2022.
Thank you, Glory.
You're welcome.
John, as a shared resource tonight to both school districts, I'm wondering about, I'm operating under the assumption that this is specifically a VSA 16706 study committee. There's nothing that specifies that. Is there a benefit to making that specific reference?
Would somebody on our board like to or not like to add in example after study committee in parentheses VSA 16706?
What is the benefit of doing that?
Just ties it back to the law and make sure when we say, because study committees, that's the whole problem that we're having right now. There's this word study committee and it's like, cool, let's study anything. All right, let's study together. But we can't get our people together under open meeting law and Robert's rules unless we follow the law here, right? I mean, we're stuck. We're stuck. So
I'll make a motion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'll second if you need a second.
Okay. So we've added VSA 706 after the frame study committee. Okay.
And will you read that all out again or no? Not the 706. I mean,
the school boards of ANWSD and MAUSD have chosen to come together to form a study or well.
That's not right, John. Let Glory do it, huh?
Yeah, Glory, go ahead.
and I meant VSA 706, not the motion.
Okay. Oh, okay.
The school boards of ANWSD and MAUSD agreed to form a study committee VSA 17706 to analyze the advisability of forming a union school district. The committee's work will ideally be completed within a time frame that will allow a vote on a proposed plan by town meeting day 2022.
Okay.
John, this is Bill. Just a quick point of correction.
Sure.
I believe the proper citation is 16 VSA. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. Any more discussion from the ANWSD? Okay, let's do this. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
You need to vote on the amendment first, John.
Okay, thank you. We'll vote on the amendment, please. Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote for the amendment of adding in the VSA 16 VSA 706. So Tom, yay or nay?
Yay.
Lori,
Yay.
Bill,
Yay.
Martha,
You're muted.
Martha,
Thumb up or down?
I don't see her.
Thumb up.
Thumb up. Okay. Kirsten,
Yay.
George,
Yay.
Chris,
Yes.
Amy,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Keith,
Yay.
Christina.
Yay.
Okay, we have an amendment. All right. So back to the main motion. Are we ready? Let's do a roll call vote. Tom,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Martha,
Yes.
Kirsten,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Christina.
Yes.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. It's such hard work. Over to you, Dawn. Now it's your turn to do the hard work.
Okay, so Mount Abraham members, is there someone willing to make a motion? And if you need the language, I'm happy to help. Steve Rooney, go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Steve.
I'll make a motion pretty much exactly the way it was just voted. I would just add the word per after committee.
Okay, so your motion is the school boards of ANWSD and MAUSD agree to form a study committee per 16 VSA 706 to analyze the advisability of forming a union school district. The committee's work will ideally be completed within the time frame that will allow a vote on a proposed plan by town meeting day 2022. Is that correct?
Agreed.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Dave?
Yep.
All right, any discussion?
I just have just a minor grammatical point. I'd put ideally before will instead of will be ideally. Will ideally be, but ideally will be, to make it grammatical.
Is that a friendly kind of amendment?
Absolutely. It's just, yeah, just a wordsmithing.
All right.
It's friendly on this end too, Don.
All right, so we won't have to go through that whole rigmarole. If you're, Dave, you open to that? Lost Dave. All right. And I'm going to move ahead with the language as we just corrected it and go through the roll call. Krista.
Yes.
Okay. And Rob.
Yes.
Thank you. Dave.
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Okay. Brad.
Yes.
Thank you. Liz.
Yes.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries. All right.
Okay.
Back to you, John.
Okay, Sheila, makeup and invitation. Could you put up the, Patrick, it would be helpful, I think, at this point to put up the picture of our possibilities for the committee makeup.
Right, I'll just share a different screen.
John?
Yes, sir.
They made a change to what we voted on. I believe we have to agree to their amendment.
Okay, okay. That's fine. What did you,
We just
what
added,
change happened?
we just added the word per before the
Okay,
16 VSA, and then
okay, good. Fair enough.
I will be the
All
go.
right, so we need a motion on our end, just there's no substantive change, but if let's make this right. George, you want to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Amy seconds, thank you. I'm not going to do a roll call vote unless somebody really wants it. But all in favor of adopting the charge and timeline with the small changes with the word per and the movement of the word ideally. All in favor? Well, is there a discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. All right, good. Thank you, George, for that. Let's do this right. Okay, everyone. And now talking about committee size. Sheila, let's just talk. Sheila or Patrick, somebody talk a little bit about the makeup and invitation. Sheila, please, and then what's possible here. And then we'll have another conversation, and then we'll get to a motion.
Well, I mean, I guess I would reiterate what I had said before, which, creating the invitation to join the committee isn't the hard part. The hard part is, part of what you just did. You adopted the charge. You've suggested the timeline. I think ultimately what you need to identify now is just what is the makeup and what is the process for any interested party to notify the board of their interest, communicate directly with the chair, for example. So you need sort of, what the specifics of what's going into the invitation. So I would suggest, first of all, you want to decide what your membership would be. You have the opportunity to have more than one board member, for example. You have to have at least one board member. So that's a decision or a discussion point. And then I've heard suggestions anywhere from 10 to 15 members come from different board members here tonight. So I think these first three bullets need to come first, and then we can talk about sort of that process for communicating out to the community and what the process and timeline is from there.
Okay. So we're back now to a place where we're all discussing together. And I think this time we were gonna go first. So are there any discussion, anybody from the ANWSD who'd like to jump in here with?
I just have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Are we just determining the number in this, or are we deciding, if we were to pick 13 members, for example, are we also stating out of the 5 Addison Northwest, we're going to have 1 board member, 2, are we deciding who will be in those 5, or are we just going to decide the number of members and whether there'll be a chair or a co-chair?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of your solicitation could be to say that you're hoping for broad representation from the 5-town community. But I think to specify beyond that which towns you'd like them to come from could be challenging, because what if you don't have interest from one town and you have 2 people from another town?
I wasn't even thinking towns. I was thinking, we would want, 1 board member, 1 teacher, 1 support staff, 1 community member, 1 parent. Are we determining what type of members, or are we just saying Addison is going to have 4 members or 5 members or 6 members? Is that the only question that we're being presented, and the board on its own will figure out? Or we just open it up and we just know we have to have at least 1 board member, and we'll see what the pool is from that. I just want to know what we're voting on.
I wonder if it might be helpful to identify a process point here that might inform this. So an assumption I've made, because it's our practice that we've used in MAUSD, when there's a subcommittee, the subcommittee is appointed oftentimes by the board chair. So from a process perspective, are the representatives from ANWSD and MAUSD going to be appointed by the chair of each board? Because in some ways, if that's true, this information is to inform the chair on the desired makeup of those committees, right? If the board wants 3 board members as a minimum, then it's sending the message to the chair who'd be appointing interested parties to the committee that that's what's desired. And maybe that helps this conversation.
Or the alternative, Patrick, would be that the full board makes that determination.
Yep.
I just, in terms of folks, to get it done, I would prefer this is just me speaking, John Strout. I would prefer this process. And anybody disagrees or doesn't like it or has a better process, please say it. I would prefer that that we decide together what number we like, okay? And that we assume that there will be at least one board member, and we can say whether we want more or more than that. I think we need to decide whether we're going to have co-chairs or not. And then I think that as a process, we have some sort of, we say it this way, that we solicit membership to this, and that the board chairs will recommend a group of members that broadly represent our communities. Okay, I just don't think narrowing it down to say one town or this or that is, but broadly recommend that broadly represented membership to the board. And then I would like our boards to vote on that membership. And I think that will be helpful to those people who are on this committee and know that it's not just, not just a board chair, although we are the board chair. We have, you all have given us some trust and authority, but that they have the backing of you, all of us that are sitting here at this meeting. And I think that's kind of important. So did you all hear that process? There'll be some sort of solicitation. It'll come to the board chairs. The board chairs will make a recommendation that broadly reflects our community to our boards, and the boards will then appoint those members. Does anybody have something better than that?
You've got a couple hands, Tom.
Tom, thank you. Don, will you lead this conversation, please?
Sure. Tom?
So, thanks. So I agree with that process. It would be something like the board chair would solicit invitations, which would then be approved by the board. I think we should have 13 members, a 13-member committee. So 8 from MAUSD, 5 from ANWSD, and that the committee would have 1 board member and co-chairs. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, and I see Martha.
Is that co-chair and committee, is that outside of the 13 members? Tom, is that when you made that suggestion?
No, I would assume that the co-chairs would come from the committee with one from each district to work together.
Yeah, okay. I feel pretty strongly that we have as much representation as we can from our district. We're already, because of the amount that we are, can be represented by us. I feel pretty strongly this is a huge decision. This is a huge, there needs to be as much community input as possible. And I'm going to stand by my comment that with a really good chair, they can handle 15 members. And I really think that more representation, should they come back and it be suggested that there is a merger, I'm using the term merger, we're going to have to sell that. So that means we're going to have to get really good input. And that's really how I feel. I also think that there should be co-chairs representing each, one from Mount Aid District and one from ours. So that's what my thoughts are.
And then I see Chris and then Kevin.
Yeah, I like the 15-member committee too. That seemed to work really well before. I wouldn't want to limit it to one board member or two board members from each side. I mean, whatever number we come up with, I'd like to say at least, because I have I don't know, I have a sneaking suspicion that there's just not going to be a whole lot of community members that want to be on a committee that is this intensive. So I wonder if we get a list of community members that would sign up for it. And I think there is a lot of interest by board members to be a part of this decision. So I guess I'd go with 15 members, co-chairs, and language that said at least 2 school board members from each district.
Thank you, Kevin, and then Krista.
Well, I was going to pitch a chair vice chair situation just so that there's clear lines of authority, if you will. So there's a structure, but after hearing the comment about co-chairs with 1 from each district, that sort of makes sense to me. So I'm not real hung up on that. I would suggest a committee size of not less than 13. Our board is 13 people and we seem to function sort of well. The other thing is, and it's a detail, and I think it really belongs within the realm of each board as they develop who the membership is, but I would pitch that we would have of our allocation would be 1/3 board members, 1/3 administration professional staff, and 1/3 community members.
Okay, thank you. Krista.
Yeah, I think I'm in support of the larger size, the 15-member configuration, especially thinking about the work of this committee happening spring, summer. Folks, reliability might wax and wane, but you want to make sure you have a core group of people that can keep things moving along. I like the idea of 2 co-chairs, and I was interested in knowing more about how the Act 46 committee was configured, just as a model of how these sorts of cross-pollinating groups are best made up, because I don't really have a strong sense of what we should recommend in terms of the constitution of the members. So I was curious to know what similar processes have looked like.
Okay, let's see, Rob, and then Dave.
Yeah, I think 15 members, like other folks have said, co-chairs, 1 from each district. I agree with. And to Krista's point, yeah, we have people that have been in the room already. I'd have suggestions, maybe, board number, but I want this to be a well-functioning committee, and let's use our historical knowledge to build off of. So what other folks think would work best, I'm all ears.
Okay, let's see, Chris, and then Dave.
Just to answer Krista's question, our study committee was split half and half board members, half community members. Worked well.
Dave, and then Sarah LaPearl.
So I like the notion of the chair bringing a slate to the board that broadly represents, the language that I like was broadly represents the community. And I think the staff should act as advisors and not be on the committee. That's my perspective. 15's fine with me.
All right, thank you. Now I've got hands. Sarah LaPearl.
I think our committee last time was split half and half with community and board members, and I found that super effective as a community member because I really didn't have the knowledge base, and there was such a steep learning curve, as we all have learned when we become board members, and it was really helpful to have the resources, especially even about how meetings are run and the process, and that there was just this background knowledge. And I would be a little bit more hesitant about throwing 11 people from the community that don't have the same background knowledge and work we've been wrestling with onto a committee with 4 board members or less. So I would opt to have a little bit more support in some ways from the board. And I think it would also be good for communication back and forth between the board and the study committee.
Christina.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I was on our committee last time too. And speaking to Chris's point about how we're going to attract community members to actually want to be on this committee, I'm pretty sure I was directly asked. So it may come to the point where we, as board members, look to our community members that we think might be interested in participating in a process like this. I guess I'm leaning toward the larger 15 number and the possibility of having 2 or 3 board members, if especially with Sarah's point right there of having some expertise is going to be probably really important for this group. So great, thanks.
Thank you. Kristen.
Oh, okay. I like the idea of the 15 members. I also like the co-chairs. I would like to see a board member, a teacher, 2 community members, and specifically 2 parents.
Okay. Kevin, is your hand up again, or is that from before?
I'm sorry, I'm not very good about taking it down.
Okay. Anyone else who didn't get a chance to make a comment want to speak?
Don, that sounded to me, I don't know, Joe, I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry.
George.
I think we should consider 6 board members, 3 from each. It certainly is a good idea to have the administrators. But I agree with Christina that it's very difficult to get community members to participate in something like this. And even if they do with well-meaning intentions, they don't have the background that the board does in what we're dealing with. I really believe that we should have at least 6 members from the boards on this committee. And that's with either a 13 or a 15 member committee. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So,
John, I don't know. It sounded like we had some consensus around 15.
That it does. I wondered if you wanted to take a stab at it.
I think we might be able to do something like that. So it sounded like we had some consensus on 15. We have some consensus on co-chairs. At this point right now, we at least 1 board member from both. And I don't know, we can, if you all, I mean, if we can handle it from here, right? If we don't want to constrain it right now, you're really constraining our own boards right now. That if the broadly represent our community means that there are more board members, then that's something decision that an individual board would be able to make when they appoint those groups. It's hard for me to say, I would like for it to be representative of many members of our community beyond our board, but I don't know. I'm with Chris. I understand it's a tough ask, and plus it's a tough ask of us. So if we can maybe get, I think, to a motion, and then we'll see how we do. Okay, Tom, do you have something to say here?
I have a motion I've drafted.
Okay, all right. Is there anything else so anybody wants to disagree with what I had to say, that like they can't possibly vote on this? if it's 15 co-chairs, and that we leave it a little more open-ended at this juncture, that for broad representation, and that it's up to the board chairs and the boards to get that done.
I think you let Tom make the motion, John.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure before we got into our. Okay, Tom, go for it. See what you can do.
So I move that the MAUSD ANWSD Merger Study Committee have a 15-member board with 9 from MAUSD and 6 from ANWSD, that this committee will have at least 2 board members, at least one board member from each district, and co-chairs, 1 from each district. Membership for the committee will be solicited by each board chair in order to broadly represent each community. Representatives will be selected by each board chair with the approval of the board.
A second?
Second.
Okay, we're in discussion. ANWSD.
So I just, to be clear, I think I agree with what everyone has been saying about more board representatives on the committee. I put it down to 1 just because it's more flexible.
It's also the statutory requirement.
It's also the statutory requirement.
George?
I'm sorry, I really think that we need to have 3, but I would be willing to vote for a resolution that said 2. Given that when the recommendation comes from the board chair, it may vary based on the level of participation from the community. But my preference is 3, but I would vote for a resolution that said 2.
Some others? Okay, folks, we've got 1 on the table. Okay, go ahead, Lori.
I just want to, I thought the motion was good, and I think John heard everything we said, and I think also we're going to find what Chris said, which is that we're going to have a hard time finding community people. And we know there's a lot of people on this board that are going to be interested. So let's leave it up to the people that are interested in being on this committee and willing to be, commit to the time to apply for it. And I think we'll get some very good people.
Okay. Lori, your hand's still up. I just want to make sure. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I'm not hearing anything else in terms of discussion or amendments or anything like that right now. So I'm going to do a roll call vote, okay? All in favor of the motion that Tom just read, anybody like to read it back?
Yes.
Okay, good. Does anybody have it? Glory, Tom, will you read it, Tom?
Glory, it'd be best if you could read it.
You might have to help me at the end.
Okay.
So the motion is for the MAUSD and ANWSD Merger Study Committee to have 15 members, 9 from MAUSD, 6 from ANWSD. The committee will have at least 1 board member from each district, co-chairs, 1 from each district, membership solicited by the board chair. That's where I might be lost the rest of you.
In order to broadly represent each community, representatives will be selected by each board chair with the approval of each board.
What he
Okay.
said.
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. All in favor, Tom,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Martha,
Yes.
Kirsten,
Yes.
George,
No.
Chris, hey, you're muted, man.
Yes.
Okay, Amy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Christina.
Yes.
Okay, over to you, Dawn.
All right, MAUSD.
Don, can I say so
Sure.
moved? I moved, so moved.
So moved. The same thing they said, huh?
I second.
Is that Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah LaPearl. Any discussion? Oh, Steve?
Just curious what happens if we don't get 15 people? What flexibility does the board chair have in that case?
I think in that case, we resort to the voluntold or asking.
I understand, but I mean, do we not get a board if we don't get 15?
That's correct.
I think because it's governed by statute, if you wouldn't have the proper representation if you're less than 15. So, because that means presumably one side, say, got their number and the other side didn't, you're off on your proportional representation.
Yeah, so I was just curious if it made more sense to to start with a smaller number and allow it to be larger, like 10, say 10 to 15, rather than making it 15 and then having to come back when we can't get 15. Just a thought.
So would that be an amendment that would say
Hey, Tom, hey, hang on one second, man.
I can't talk, can I? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we need to let them do this.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I suppose one way to do this, Steve, because this requires the chairs to bring the slate back to the boards, if the chairs can't, in any way come up with the number of people they need to represent their communities, then I think the chairs can be in communication, and perhaps the recommendation that comes back to the board is for a slate that's smaller, that keeps the representation that is required by statute, if that's what the situation requires.
And then we just re-vote on it then.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Any other discussion? All right. Are you all clear on the motion? Okay. All right. So I'll go through, if there's no further discussion, I'll go through the roll call. Krista, on the motion regarding the makeup of the committee, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Thank you. Dave?
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Brad?
Yes.
Thank you. Liz?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. Okay. So the motion carries. All right. Back to you, John.
On to the next. Okay, let's keep going. Approving the securing a facilitator. I believe, Patrick, you were going to get us started.
Yeah, I can just share. So really the question is, does this group support, does each board support pursuing a facilitator? In anticipation of that being a yes, because of the importance of the work, I've started reaching out to see if I could find someone who would be interested in doing that work, if that was the direction these boards wanted to go. So far, I'm somewhere around 0 for 10 on the people I've reached out to. All have actually been interested in the work and unfortunately haven't been available to do the work. So I'm still in process of trying to find someone that could do the work, should this group be interested in that. And I think the support of a facilitator, in particular, someone knowledgeable in the field of education, you know, some history of leadership in some capacity, could be a great resource. So that's sort of where I am in terms of my pursuit and what I think about the importance of that role.
Thank you, Patrick. I'll lead this one along here this time, Dawn. Are there any, we're kind of in a broad discussion, and the question is, do we want a facilitator? Well, there's one thumbs up. Okay, they've got some hands. Mark, go for it. I see, first of all, I want to acknowledge that Liz has a hand up, a thumb up. So we'll start there. Mark.
I think a facilitator is a necessity in this, but I'm questioning whether or not it's a decision that our two boards make, or is this something that once the study committee meets for the first time, it's their decision whether or not they want a facilitator? Are we overstepping our boundaries?
Thank you for that. Chris?
In our committee, we had a consultant facilitate, Stephen Dale. We also had a financial consultant, Ed Gomo. And we also had Chris Leopold as legal counsel. I couldn't have done it without them. There's no way.
Thanks, Chris. I saw a hand go up.
I think
this isn't just from ANWSD. Anybody, we're kind of in a cross-board discussion here. That's why we're having this meeting right now. Some other thoughts, Bill?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to have a facilitator. I think generally we want to do that, but it does concern me that if Patrick's had such trouble finding somebody, you know, we could say that we want to have a facilitator, but that might just be the easy part of all this. But I would be in support of trying to get a facilitator for them.
Thank you. Martha?
Yeah, I'm curious if Sheila feels the same way that Patrick does about it. I'm just curious what your thoughts were. You heard from him, I didn't hear from you. And then
yeah, Patrick and I are working really closely on this, and
okay.
he just was tasked with making those calls and didn't realize it was going to be such a long list. But he's
I definitely thought that was one of the easy ones.
Yeah,
it hasn't turned out to be that way.
Yeah, but I'm fully supportive. I think that you know, you need someone to do that sort of heavy lifting and organization between meetings to make sure that you're making the most of the meetings when you get these hopefully 15 people together, right? So I think to keep the process organized and moving forward, it's very, very essential to the work. I hope we can find someone.
And after hearing from Chris about you know, I'm wondering if when we're talking about this budget and maybe it's out of line or whatever, you know, a financial consultant and a legal consultant as well should be added. I don't know. I mean, is it too soon? Is it not? I don't know. Just putting it out there.
Thank you. Lori.
So I know our business office is pretty much maxed out. I don't know about Mount Abraham's business office, but I'm really glad Chris brought up what he brought up, because financial help, I think, is going to be really important to our community. You know, probably going to want to see some models. And like I said, I don't think our business office has the capacity.
Thank you, Lori. Sarah?
I'm going to just clarify this with Dawn, but I believe we didn't have one, and I think it would have been helpful with our Act 46 study committee.
We did have one, and I think then he was absent, and then we had to get another one. So we did struggle in between while our
Right.
facilitator was away. So
That is what I remember. So we switched facilitators. Okay, that comes back to me. We switched chairs. We switched superintendents. I think it would have been nice to have had a little consistency there. So I totally support a facilitator. Should we be able to find one, which I think the only action item is approve securing one.
right,
That's right.
not who it is.
That's right. Chris. There you go.
So what was I going to say? Sorry.
I don't know.
Bye.
Okay, Christina.
I'm totally in support of getting a facilitator for sure. Patrick and Sheila, I have a question for you two. Do you feel confident in our business office and legal help that we can handle that within our own school districts to facilitate this work, or do we need outside help in both those areas? I'm just curious what your opinion is about that.
Well, I mean, I guess I would just say that one of the things in anticipation of this work and the need for good data, I think we've been working really closely together over the last year or more to align the kind of data we're putting in front of the board, up to and including the financial reports. So for example, when our board meets in a retreat on Wednesday night, we're going to share a few new models that we have generated as a result of looking at how Mount Abe has been modeling the data. So I think, I think we're well on our way to doing that support work. I guess it sort of depends what the committee decides they need for data and when they need it. Might we need more support down the line? Perhaps. I guess I would add to that, as Patrick already alluded to, we've done the NESDEC study. We're looking at transportation. We're already laying a lot of the groundwork that will serve as the foundation for the information that we think will be requested. So I think, yes, I think we're okay. But I guess it depends too what's requested.
I would agree with everything Sheila said, and where my mind goes is, as I think about, and maybe Chris can speak to what the experience was like. I don't recall a separate financial advisor in the MAUSD process. My sense is an outside financial advisor is going to need a lot of information from our business office anyway. So I feel like there's going to be a fairly high level of involvement anyway from our business offices. So let's start down the path, assuming that we'll have capacity to provide the necessary information, because probably we've done a lot of the calculations in some way, shape, or form already, or can manipulate something we've done to some extent to meet the specific question. And I think knowing there's some flexibility, if what the group's needs are exceed our capacity, then we have to have a conversation about how do we get the support. It's not a matter of whether or not they get the support. It's about how do we deliver the support.
Rob?
Yeah, Patrick, you hit my nail on the head there with the sense that the weather versus with outside help. I don't think we should hamstring the group saying that they can't go further beyond our business office or our central offices. And it sounds like people really have strong opinions that we would have a facilitator, and I'd like to empower the group to make their own decision. But at the same time, if it's already been 10 no phone calls, I don't want to not set them up to succeed, and maybe helping them have an option to say, hey, we've secured someone possibly if you'd like that person. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, Ed Gomo, the financial consultant, played a pretty small role. I'm not suggesting that we need that, but I think a facilitator of some sort and legal counsel, I would think those are necessary. I mean, we also had $25,000 that came from the state of Vermont to help us in our pursuit. We didn't have to fund this ourselves. So but we used it all.
Mhm.
That's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, everyone. I'm hearing that there's consensus here that we at least need one facilitator, and that we would like to make that recommendation. Is there anybody that disagrees with me right now? Liz started with the hand up. So Dawn, if it's okay, I think we can move to a motion here.
I think so.
Okay, can anyone in the ANWSD make a motion that represents our desires related to a facilitator?
I'll try.
Thank you, Tom.
So I move that we authorize the superintendents to hire a facilitator to work with the ANWSD MAUSD Merger Study Committee.
Second the motion.
Thank you, George. Any discussion by the ANWSD? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Let's do the roll call real quick. Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
Kirsten?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Dawn?
Okay, MAUSD. Is there somebody willing to make a motion? Dave?
So I strongly oppose the notion that the superintendent move forward with hiring a facilitator. I think this is a decision of the study committee. I don't mind at all the staff doing research in this regard, but the study committee ought to make the decision of who to hire as a facilitator.
All right, MAUSD, is there a motion? Somebody willing to make a motion to approve
I will.
securing a facilitator?
Yeah,
Sarah?
I will. I will make a motion to approve securing a facilitator to support the study committee. Is that what it said?
Yep. Is there a second?
Krista, second.
Okay. Any discussion? Steve?
So we're not specifying who is securing the facilitator as opposed to the motion that the Hansen Northwest made.
If we
They specified who was going to secure the facilitator,
correct,
and we're not.
correct.
Okay. So should we? I mean, somebody has to do this. Who are we empowering to do this?
I meant to make a motion that it was reflected exactly what their motion said. So I apologize if that did not work out right. Should I amend it, Dawn?
Sure.
Okay.
Are you looking for the language they used?
That was what I was intending to do.
So they authorize the superintendent to hire a facilitator to work with the ANSWD and MAUSD study committee.
I'm amending it to include authorizing the superintendent to secure a facilitator to support whatever you just said, the study committee. I didn't write it down.
Okay. And Krista, are you agreeable with that, her amendment to her own motion?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Rob? Rob?
Yeah, sorry. I agree with Dave in regards to empowering the study committee, but I'm also trying to be thoughtful. I feel tension with this timeline that we have too, and knowing that efforts have already been made and unsuccessful. I don't quite know how to remedy those two things. I just feel tension there, but I'd like to empower the study committee to make that decision, not us.
Okay. Liz?
I would imagine that if the study committee were unhappy with the facilitator chosen, I mean, they'd be welcome, I would think, to look into that person as much as possible. And if they decided they needed somebody else, they could certainly do so.
All right, thank you. Kevin?
It may be a point of order, but I believe the superintendent holds the purse strings, so they are the ones that ultimately will have to, or the central office is the one that ultimately have to procure the services. I understand hiring somebody that may not be compatible with the search committee, but based on how our central offices operated in the past, I think they've always had a collaborative attitude about those sort of things.
Okay. All right, thank you. Dave and then Brad.
So I reiterate my opposition to this, and I would move to amend the motion that the superintendent recommend to the study committee more than one facilitator for the purpose of furthering the work of the study committee.
So Dave has made a motion to amend.
I'll second, Rob.
Okay.
Do we have to vote on the other amendment first, or I'm just checking on her?
I took the other one as a friendly one because you made it and then you corrected it and Krista was okay with that. So I took it as that.
Okay.
But now Dave has made another amendment that the superintendent recommend to the study committee more than one facilitator. Any discussion on that amendment? Dave?
So I'm not fully aware, I'm not very much aware of what's going on in the Virgins district. In this district, the perception is that the superintendent's running the show, and resentment such as it is building against the superintendent, and it's the superintendent's plan, and it's the superintendent's facilitator, and it's the superintendent's board. And I think our board has to begin to take responsibility for our actions. If there are complaints about the actions or concerns, it really should be our board that takes responsibility and not have all the pitchforks, as one person described it, have all the pitchforks aimed at the superintendent. So the responsibility of the study committee, they're supposed to be separate from our boards. They're supposed to have their own authority, and to start them out as appearing to be doing the superintendent's work, I think is a mistake. And perception, it means an awful lot in politics, and it means an awful lot in terms of the support we're going to get eventually for whatever decision we make in terms of moving forward with a merger. And so for those reasons, I think that it should be the study committee that determines who their facilitator is.
Sarah LaPearl.
My understanding that is that a facilitator is a neutral body, and that a facilitator would help the committee get started with agenda planning and get started on the right foot. So that is why I thoroughly support a facilitator, no matter who that person is. The person should have gone through appropriate training, and it should not be an arm of one of our superintendents. So I have full faith in the facilitators out there to just work with what they've been given.
And Kevin?
I'm struggling a little bit about supplying multiple choices, arranging for multiple facilitators to pick and choose. Maybe the way to word it would be for the superintendent to arrange a suitable facilitator for the committee or something like that, so that there is more of a connection that the committee is involved in that. But if we're already having trouble finding one, I'm not sure who's got the time to start going out and searching for prospective work to put out to obtain several proposals.
Okay. And Brad, sorry, Brad, you keep hopping around, so I lose you.
That's okay. I still have to figure out the hand business. I don't know, maybe something, I hear what Kevin's saying, perhaps some language to the effect that the superintendent will consult with the committee on, or in collaboration with the committee will select a facilitator. I mean, I think I'm generally of the opinion that a facilitator, if we can find one, would be important for the success of the committee. I agree with that point. But I do think that, to Dave's point, there are some sentiments in the community that the superintendent is kind of running the show, and to protect Patrick a little bit, perhaps some sort of collaboration with the selection committee might be the way to go.
Any more discussion on Dave's amendment that the superintendent recommend to the study committee and bring the study committee more than one facilitator? Krista?
Yeah, I'm wondering if more than one puts us in a pickle, if there is not more than one. So if we could say, provide the study committee with facilitator options to consider. If the only option is one, that's the option. There may be several, but if we can't find them, the committee can still move on with whatever is presented to them.
Okay. Dave, is that hand up again, or is it from before?
Yes, if I may speak a third time, and I apologize, but I would accept Brad or Kevin's or Krista's changes or modifications to, if they were interested in amending my amendment.
Okay, now we're getting to my favorite part, the amendments to the amendments. So how about we go back to just the amendment and work back from there? So the current amendment is the superintendent recommend to the study committee, bring a recommendation of more than one facilitator to the study committee. That's what I'm asking you, what you're voting on right now. All right, Krista, in regards to that amendment, how do you vote?
Well, sorry. So, I mean, if Dave is up for that modification, does it have to be, can we make it friendly so we don't have to defeat his? And
so Dave and Rob were the initial movers of that.
So it could say instead, the superintendent will make a recommendation of facilitator options to the study committee. So it's not securing, and it's providing for options if they're available.
I find that friendly.
All right, Rob, how about you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Thank you, Krista.
Okay, everybody's friendly. All right. All right, so now that this is going to cause them to have to go back because they're going to have to. So with all our friendliness here, we're going to authorize the superintendent to recommend facilitator options to the study committee. Is that where we are? MAUSD? Did I hit it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on that? All right. So, all right, moving to vote on that motion for this, to authorize the superintendent to recommend options, facilitator options to the study committee. Krista.
Yes.
All right. Rob.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Eve.
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Liz.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Okay, that one passed. All right, John.
Okay, I heard it. All right, ANWSD, we need to pick this up. So let's get the motion out on the table and we'll discuss it. We'll vote on it. Tom, can you do it?
Would it be appropriate for Dawn to read the motion back to us?
That'd be fine.
So to authorize the superintendent to recommend facilitator options to the study committee.
I move that.
Second.
Okay, NWSD, do we have a big problem with this or is this okay?
Do we care that no particular superintendent has been designated? You guys can fight it out.
I think that they're gonna work together.
We can only authorize our superintendent and you can only authorize your superintendent. So I think we cover it in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say something just as a matter of, like moving this along here, but I think something that's kind of important. I'm not sure that I'm worried about the bias of these superintendents. I mean, but they're very active participating in this, puts their jobs at risk. What interest personally does one of these superintendents have? And so, but I hear and I understand the point being made. I think we can live with the recommendation, a recommendation made to the study committee. If that's going to bring some more credibility to the work of the study committee, that's fine. ANWSD, anybody else have a problem with what the motion? Okay. Okay, let's do this then. A roll call. Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
Kirsten?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, last one, a budget. I'm back to you. I believe this time it was Sheila who's gonna remind us about the parameters of a budget.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to put that slide back up that has the dollar amount, but basically, we're confident that we can work within the budget that doesn't require the districts to go out for a vote. So the 25,000, which would be the same proportional makeup as all of the other, the 61%, 39%, meaning 15,250 would be contributed from the MAUSD and 9,750 from the Addison Northwest School District for this process. So that would be the budget amount in that proportional division.
I would so move.
Okay. We're moving to what? To create a budget up to $25,000?
Yes.
Okay.
John,
Yeah.
I wrote down some language if that's helpful.
Okay. Will you ask George if that is helpful?
George, is that helpful?
Yeah, go for it.
So I move that we approve a budget of up to $25,000 to support the work of the study committee, proportionally divided between the districts according to 16 VSA 706A.
Okay. Hey, and we're also skipping a little bit of a step here, everybody. We need to have a kind of a broad discussion. So we'll get to that motion in just one moment. But so Martha.
I have a couple concerns about this
Okay.
$25,000 and I just need some clarity.
Sure.
So the $25,000, that is for everything, including the transportation that I read is already study that's already being done, or I'm really, is this $25,000 whole for the entire study? Is it just for the consultant? What about if we need legal study? What about if, you
Yep,
know,
I think I get the gist of your question. The
Yeah.
transportation study is already in the works. And again, kind of going back to this parallel process that we're each engaged in our own district, right? We've got acute financial concerns that we're each faced with that we're going to have to solve no matter what. So the transportation study is already underway, and
Yeah,
that
I've been on the
we're
Mountie
already
board.
paying for. We already pay for legal services. We already have contracts with legal counsel. So I don't think that we need to set aside a separate contract for additional legal services. I think it can come within the construct of what we already work with our attorneys on. And according to what Patrick learned from talking to Donna Russo Savage at the AOE, it's not really defined in any other way anyway, right? So the parameters around this are not very restrictive. So I think we're pretty confident that we can cover that through the existing legal contracts we already have. So really the only additional expense is in and around the facilitation of this group work that we're, the study committee work that we're talking about. So primarily I see that money going toward that facilitation.
I also wonder, I mean, I understand there isn't any money from Montpelier to help us with this, but I don't think we should be afraid to ask. I mean,
right.
The reality is they put us in the situation.
And I have reached out to our local legislators asking. We've asked the Secretary of Education as well, and he's given us the answer of there's nothing that he's aware of right now that we can tap, but we can keep asking.
Yeah, no, I think that's important, but yeah, okay. I just wanted that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Mark.
I think starting below the 25,000 threshold makes sense just for timeline purposes and speed. And that doesn't mean that the study group can't come back to the boards at a later time and say, we can't do this with this budget. You're going to have to bring it to a vote of the public. That still leaves them the option later, but it gets this moving, and it needs to get moving.
Christina?
I was just wondering that facilitation, or that 26,000 or whatever it is, that doesn't have to cover what happens after, let's say, a study committee said move forward with a merger, like the actual vote. Would it have to cover printing ballots and all that kind of stuff? That's totally separate.
Okay. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. Any other comments from MAUSD and ANWSD? Bill.
Yeah, John, I'm just looking I think Patrick probably knows this by heart, or Sheila. To answer Christina's question that once they send their report off to the clerk, that committee ceases to exist, if I recall, like that. Once they hand off their report, they're done. So any funds that would be required after that wouldn't be on them.
Effectively, in the statute, I was reviewing it again today. Effectively, their work is done once they've submitted the reports. They may answer some questions if they're during the community engagement portions of the work and things, but technically, their work doesn't sunset until I think either A, they recommend not merging, and therefore that's their recommendation and it doesn't go to the state board, or B, they do send articles of agreement to the state board for approval. If that's the case, they don't sunset until there is an affirmed vote by the clerk of each board from the community, right? So either the community votes yes or votes no, and that's confirmed, and then they're done.
Thank you, Patrick. That's right. You refreshed my memory on that. Sorry, I had that detail a little wrong. But I think that there's nothing in there that says that they'd be required to pay for the cost of printing ballots and running an election. I don't think that's an expectation.
Thank you. Tom?
I just wanted to clarify with Mark, would the language of up to be sufficient? So I mean, you seem to want to, you thought that we shouldn't approve the full amount. But if we said up to the amount, would that kind of help, or would you prefer something else? And if you would prefer something else, what's the amount you think we should put forward?
I was just thinking that the statute says 25,000 and above needs voter approval. So by saying up to 25,000, 25,000 is that threshold. You want a dollar below that.
Got it.
I think it actually says more than, I actually
More
think
than?
the
Okay.
statute says more than 25,000. So we're clear up to 25,0and. As long as it's
I just
not
hate to make a $1 mistake
25,001.
and be
right.
All right, everyone. We're doing well here. Is there anyone out there who has a number that they would like to propose, or that they think is a better number than up to $25,000? Knowing all of the things that we know and the unknowns that frankly, like we simply can do something now, but we can't know exactly what the committee is going to need. And if they need more, then they're going to come to us, and we're going to have to either decide to go to the voters and ask for that money, or we're going to say, sorry, we're not going to give it. I mean, and that'll be that. Is there anybody that has another number? Okay, then Dawn, if it's okay, we're going to jump to and do our work, and then we'll send it over to you.
Good luck.
Okay, thank you. Tom, would you read that again, what you wrote, what you said?
So I move that we approve a budget of up to $25,000 to support the work of the study committee, proportionally divided between the districts according to 16 VSA 706A.
Thank you. George, I'll ask you if you'll second that, or if that's okay.
Yeah, second.
Thank you. All right, any discussion about that motion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote here. Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
Kirsten?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Mark?
yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Thank you. Dawn?
All right, MAUSD. Steve, you're heading for the mute button.
So moved.
To approve a budget of up to $25,000 to support the work of the study committee, and it's proportionately divided between the districts in accordance with 16 VSA 706A.
Agreed.
Okay.
I'll second Krista.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, I'll move right to vote. Krista, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, Rob?
Yes.
Thank you. Dave?
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin? Kevin?
Yes.
Okay. Steve,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
thank you. Liz,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
thank you. That's everybody that's here. All right, thank you. That one motion passed.
Great. All right. Okay, we're there. We're almost there. Okay, everyone. I'm gonna turn it, Patrick and Dawn, we put this in here. I'm gonna turn it over to you all to for this first discussion item.
All right, so this is the question is there anything additional, any additional resources needed? We've talked about the legal piece, we've talked about the facilitator, we've talked about financial. Is there anything else that anyone can think of that may be needed?
Do they want to have their own website?
Good question. Really good.
How about food?
Maybe alcohol.
Yeah.
Krista.
Well, kind of along what the lines of what Steve was saying, just the, the communication piece. I'm sure they'll need some support communicating their work out. And I don't know what that looks like, but.
And I know
We're not taking action or anything, but we are kind of generating some ideas here, some helpful. Look, I mean, before we had ANWS, we had SUs, and we could use a website, but the notion of a website is important. I mean, like, where's it going to go to learn about this? I mean, we're going to share it on both of ours. These are good questions. Oh, sorry, I interrupted, Dawn.
That's all right. Christina.
Just to build on what Krista was just saying, I mean, I think we could offer our community engagement committees to that committee, possibly if they wanted to use us to help communicate to the community.
Okay. That's a great idea. Bill.
Yeah, I apologize if this has already been covered, but there is a cap, as we all know, of no more than $25,000 without having to go to the voters. Are we allowed to basically kind of supplement that in a way that could feel like we're circumventing that by providing other contributions that do have a value that, you could assign a cash value to any of these forms of support that we're offering? Are we sidestepping a state statute by doing that, or are we specifically allowed to exceed the $25,000 amount if we just don't track it that way? And I'm not suggesting anyone's trying to do anything sneaky. I just want to make sure we're clear.
That was specifically the question I advanced up through the AOE to get clarity on that. And I don't yet have the clarity on that. The initial response was, my recommendation that really the only expense that I was envisioning really for the study committee that wasn't already captured somewhere else was the facilitator. And that passed at least the straight face test of the legal counsel at AOE. She wanted to get another opinion on that and looped in another person on a couple of emails, and we haven't yet gotten a response from the other person. So it's a somewhat tentative yes at this point that our proposal passes the test, but we may find out otherwise, in which case I'll share that information out and we can figure out what we do with it then.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Okay. John and Sheila, I guess we're going to move on to your part.
Okay, that's good. I know everybody's getting really tired here, but we wanted to put these in here just to generate just a little discussion. It's a rare thing for us to be together. Communication advocacy regarding the merger study or the study group itself. In what ways do we not? I mean, do we not want to? Be an advocate, but in what ways do we want to communicate to others what just happened here tonight, or what's going to happen with this, study group, or what is going to happen? There's going to be a lag of time between now and between now and when a study committee is formed? What is it that we're going to say has happened here and will happen? And I think we need kind of a bit of a plan to bridge that gap. I know the newspaper people are here, but you know, what are we going to do to say what did we just do? Bill, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry to be talking so much in the last
No,
couple minutes.
please, it's okay.
All right, so I just want to make sure that we're clear when we talk about advocacy, that it's clear that both boards have agreed that the community ought to benefit from understanding its options around whether or not we should merge. What neither board has done, to my knowledge, not our board anyway, is said that we think a merger should happen. And so I think we have to make sure there's a distinction. What nobody's been asked, nobody on either of these boards have been asked, do you think we should merge? We've only been asked, do you think we should look into it and get information and bring that back to the community as an option? And that's something that we've all agreed to. So I just think I don't mean to get up on a soapbox or anything, but I just think we have to be clear, whatever advocacy we do, that we're being clear that we've all agreed as two boards that this is a question worth exploring, but that hasn't been answered yet. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
I would think too, to add possibly what's obvious, but to use your regular communication channels. I mean, you do a front porch forum post every time you have a board meeting. This is a board meeting. So, communicating out about this meeting just like you would any other meeting, or since you have a committee rep, that's a board member, at least one, right? That person could be communicating back at the board meeting, which is a public meeting, which is a regular update. What is going on in the committee, what's been discussed, where are you at with any of the work you're doing? So I feel like just leaning into those structures would be really supportive.
Some more, Stephen.
So just to Bill's point, I mean, when we agreed as a board to form to allow this possibility to be investigated, I think those questions were raised by the public in the meetings that we were having discussing this, and I think we wanted to make it very clear that the stage that we are in is fact finding, that we're not advocating for this to happen. We're trying to provide more information on the possibilities.
Kevin?
I'm a little contorted here. I mean, we recognize there's a financial problem. We recognize that this is a potential solution, and we are pursuing it as boards. So I think I understand what Bill's saying, that we don't want to start selling beer or anything like that to influence votes, but we have an interest, and it may be thinly veiled, but we're looking for options to make sure that we can contain costs and we can maintain at least, and maybe even improve, class size mixes on the high school side of things. And it's becoming very important for, our district, and certainly the Addison Northwest district is as well, as to work out some sort of a solution.
Martha.
I think we have a really good way that we communicate with the public, and I think we should continue to use that rather than try to create more ways.
Thank you, Martha. Tom?
I think it's also worth adding into this that this is actually pretty cool what we've been doing today. I mean, it's exhausting and we're all tired, and it's taken a ton of work, but we're dealing with really profoundly difficult issues in an appropriate way. And where we represent like 10, 11 towns. I mean, this is pretty cool. I think that should be celebrated.
all I would advocate for is the process. We are advocating that a process is happening to try to solve problems in an appropriate, civic-minded way. That's what I would advocate for.
Krista.
I guess this is mostly to our board that I think, like Martha was saying, we do already have some good communication channels, and we should be leaning into those and weaving this meeting into the story that we've been telling about our process. And it is one of the many different things we're looking into. So, I think starting there with, letting folks know the meetings happen and using those avenues to do that makes good sense.
Chris?
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot to even communicate, and definitely nothing to advocate at this point. We've put together a committee that is supposed to do some fact finding and figure out whether this is something that we want to do or not. So I think we use our regular channels to explain that, yeah, we've created a committee to look into this.
Thank you. Liz?
I'd like to thank Reagan Cahart is still here, and I know we have a couple of great student reps on our board as well, and they are on a community council at school that has representatives from all of our towns, community members and staff. And for me, I think we have our adult lines of communication, but at some point we need to think about how this is going to get out to students and what they're hearing and what they're thinking and feeling. So I don't think it's your responsibility, Reagan, but I do think that we need to think about that piece as well.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, we've gone around here a little bit. Now, I will make it's not something that we need to vote on. It's just sort of head nods here. But look, I mean, I would be willing if there was a partner over there, and I haven't talked to Don, so I'm afraid to do that. But I agree with Tom. This is like a rare thing to happen, that school boards show up and they're trying to do something together like this. And I also agree with Bill, certainly. I mean, we need to communicate to the people that we're not taking a stand here. We need to learn, and we've come together to learn. We have good reasons to learn, all right? We have good reasons to explore options. And I would like to be able to share that in a joint letter. We have an opportunity. So if my board was okay with that and empowering me to write something, a letter to the editor, just to say, like, this is what we did. We're excited about it. We want to share it with you. This is what we're not doing, and to have it co-authored by a member of our board and a member of your board, that doesn't break any open meeting laws. It's two people talking and writing together. That have your support to try to do this. Is that something that people would be willing, not head nods, to do? I'm okay doing that, and I'll reach out to to anybody in my group. But who's going to help me on your side?
I'm willing to help if my board is in support of that.
I don't know. I can't tell. I'm getting mostly thumbs up, but I'm certainly not hearing anybody say, don't do it. I hear fact finding. It'll be full of what? Fact finding. It'll be full of, questions and investigation. It'll be look forward to what's possible, what's coming, be aware that a study committee has been created. And here's what to look for. It'll talk about, some issues and what we did tonight, essentially. Okay. And then I also hear us just encouraging ourselves to use the structures that we have in place already. And there's kind of a call out to you, Reagan, and your co-partners at MAUSD, in the MAUSD, to maybe see how you all want to talk about this before you leave us. Everyone, I think we've come to an end. I think we've come to the end. I would like to move to adjourn. this meeting for the ANWSD board. Is there somebody in my board that would be willing to adjourn?
So moved. This is Lori.
Thank you, Lori. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Kirsten. All in favor of adjourning tonight. Thank you all so much for your tireless work tonight. I'm tired. All in favor of adjourning for the ANWSD, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Thank you all so much. Dawn, to you.
All right, MAUSD. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Dave?
Dave Sharp.
All right.
Second.
Is that Steve? Yep. All right, all MAUSD in favor of adjourning at 9:21, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, all.